This broadcast of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series is brought to you by Malwar Transport, oversized cargo and trucking logistics specialists of Quebec. Visit their website on www.malwar-transport.ca. The sky hangs loose and heavy, saturated with rain here, and a deep grey. Welcome to Germany, ladies and gents, for Season 4, Round 4, the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, powered by Malwar Transport and live on TRTN. As always, I am Regan Clark. You join us here in Nurburgring, or more specifically Nurburg, at the aforementioned Nurburgring. Namely, its GP Strecke circuit, founded in 1985, comprised of 16 turns and just under 3.2 miles of FIA Grade 1, designed to bring about the return of the German Grand Prix since its last bouting in 1976. It would serve Formula 1 under many names: the German Grand Prix, the European Grand Prix, and the Luxembourg Grand Prix upon the reintroduction of the GP Strecke. Its last ever appearance in Grand Prix racing was in 2020, under its bizarre Eiffel Grand Prix moniker. Otherwise, it's seen racing for the GT World Challenge Europe Series, DTM, and European Truck Racing Championship. The elephant in the room, or I suppose the one that hangs over turn 16, is its join onto the infamous Nurburgring Nordschleife, which forms the 24-hour circuit, first came about in 2002, and holds racing for the Nurburgring Langstrecke Series and the Nurburgring 24-hour. It is a fantastic circuit to make up for Round 4 of the championship as we begin a 5-week-long stint here in mainland Europe before we head over to North America later on in the season. Taking a look at the calendar so far, we find ourselves on the start of a great voyage through Western Europe. Starting here in Germany, we head to Austria next week, then Belgium the week after that, and then Great Britain for another 2 weeks after that, before taking the trip across the Atlantic to our final 4 rounds of the championship, starting off with a double stint in America along the easternmost part of the country, over in Watkins Glen, New York, and Indianapolis, Indiana, before we take a trip all the way across the Pacific to New South Wales, Australia, at the Mount Panorama Circuit in Bathurst. Our last round then will be in Austin, Texas. Round 12 of the championship way down the line, but now we charge ever closer to the midway of the season. And following on from action in South Africa, seeing 2 wins for Labay, 1 for Tanguay in Pro, 2 for Zavala, 1 for Pereira in Semi-Pro, and 2 for Carr and 1 for Grenier Massey in Am, we find ourselves facing down what could be quite an interesting set of circumstances heading towards tonight's round of the championship. Taking a look at where we stand in the championship standings so far, in the Pro category, Christian Labay leads the charge now, 40 points clear of Wish for Winnings, the one on screen at the moment, who suffered routine heartbreak in South Africa despite 3 pole position starts. Brandon David in 3rd, with David Tanguay in 4th, Vincent Simard in 5th place, with George Todd in 6th with 87 points. A joint 7th place then found behind between Carl Martel and Dylan Vekere, both of which holding 81 points at the table in the Pro standings. 9th place for that of this one here, the number 21 of Justin Benton, with 75 points to spare, rounding out the top 10 in Clinton Bourne with 62 points. Looking away from the Pro standings into the Semi-Pros, we find Ruben Pereira now leading the charge over Adrian Zavala, with Ivan Sanchez making 3rd place, and then now with 117 points for Hokianos Motorsport. Isaac McMillan makes 4th place, up and ahead of Aidan Christie, who rounds out the top 5. Looking further down the order from 6th place, Joey Fisher with 94 points, ahead of Adam Jeffrey with 90 points. 8th place, I should say there, for Andrew Veldkamp with 85 points. 9th place for the Jackal with 73 points, rounding out the top 10. We find that of Brad Peacock, now 60 points strong in the Semi-Pro standings. Last but not least, then, the AM standings here, with Brandon Kahn, his move to Alpine proving very fruitful, now leads 9 points clear over Didier Potvin in 2nd. Cedric Grenier-Massey makes 3rd place ahead of Matthew Shinowski in 4th. Curtis Bell-Bray rounds out the top 5, 98 points strong with Chevrolet. Thomas Romano in 6th place with 97 points, up and ahead of Ray Risty in 7th with Aston Martin, 94 points strong. He's up and ahead of Karina Stinson by 3 points over Stinson with 91 points. Casey Miles makes 9th place with 43 points, rounding out the top 10. Adrian Malherbe with 37 points. Taking a look over towards the standings in terms of the Teams Championship, still finds Malwar Racing leading in Pro, but struggling for another round after Kyle Army behind Breaking Point Racing in all other categories. Taking a look through each order then, after round 3 of the championship. Malwar Racing, of course, maintained lead in the pros. Team 16 making second. 161 Motorsports now up to third, with G-Force fourth and Milk Crate Racing rounding out the top 5. Semi-pros sees Breaking Point Racing lead 5 points clear over Malwar Racing after Kyalami's round last week. Ford Curva stays steady in third. Holkianos now in fourth place, with 161 Motorsports to the back of the top 5. Breaking Point Racing continue to hold the charge in the AM category, currently standing 36 points clear over that of Malwar Racing. Team Raceline Sim, I should say, stay in third place, with Let's Race Mate in fourth, and Florida Engineering round out the top 5. Looking away from the championship standings and in towards the regulations for tonight, you join us in the last 10 minutes of a 60-minute free practice session coming up around the corner. The same 30 minutes that has presided over all rounds of the championship so far, and a 90-minute race for the first of our Enduros this season. The staggered qualifying session, of course, for those unfamiliar. First 10 minutes over to the AM drivers, middle 10 minutes to the semi-pros, and the last 10 minutes over to the pros. We'll see 2 mandatory pit stops in tonight's race for fuel and the introduction of the pit window. A 60-minute pit window will open after the first 15 minutes of racing and will close 15 minutes before its end. That'll give drivers opportunity to strategize, and with a 90-minute race coming up, 2 stops included, we find the average stint limit to be around 30 minutes today. We, of course, have seen historically drivers have pushed the envelope out on what exactly those parameters look like. Following on board at the moment with Justin Benson and taking a look out to the wider order of things, sees LeBay at the head of the field there by 640 thousandths of a second. We'll take a look at qualifying predictions a little later on into quali at the moment. We find ourselves with just about 3.5 minutes left to go. Taking a look in the session thus far, the entire top 10 dominated by the Premier Pro category. As for semi-pros, Adrian Zavala leads the charge from 11th, and the AMs, it's Didier Potvin of Malwar Racing Aston Martin, 13th overall in the session. One remarkable story, though, pertains to this one here. Brandon Carr now leading the AM Championship after South Africa's round in round 3 of the championship, the first triple sprint of the season, and this was a choice I suppose many were scratching their heads at. We do see there's some trouble for him down at Dunlop, but one thing that really stands out about that 888 heading in towards tonight's round, the fact that he now stands at the head of the field, and the fact that he took a sizable points penalty after round 1 for swapping his car to Alpine. So knew he was getting off to a bit of a limp start into round 2 of the championship. You can see that choice has been wonderfully made then for Carr, because he has now got quite the running start heading towards the first third of the championship. We are only a few weeks away then from the season midway during our European chapter. Taking a look further up the order then, Wishful Winnings still scorned by the events of Kyalami's triple sprint, and so too were we, as you'll no doubt remember. Technical difficulties here on TRTN. Again, I'm still not going to hear the end of that one in my mind. And the number 23, I imagine, is kicking themselves much to the same. A triple pole position start. That qualifying session gave them every building block necessary for a race win, but one failed to materialize. Still chasing the successes he found back at the season premiere in Valencia. This one will be vowing for revenge here in Germany. The reason why we were so specific on the sky hanging low and grey with the possibility of rain today is the fact that we do actually stand at quite the possibility indeed. More often than not, round on round, we've seen a 0% chance. Now, albeit this isn't going to sound like much of an increase, but that probability, according to Race Control, has now come up to 10%. And with the conditions as they are, an average ambient temperature of roughly 16 degrees right now stands at 17 degrees on track, and 17 on ambient and 22 on track. And the sky very saturated with clouds at the moment, full overcast for the race ahead. We do find ourselves with a very real possibility of seeing wet racing in this championship. I believe that could actually stand among the first opportunities we've ever seen for wet racing in the GT4s here on the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. I say here because we have seen it in the past. Those will remember, one of our best rounds we ever covered was a wet race across GT3 and GT4 over on the HCCL Multi-Class Championship. Season 3 at the Circuit Paul Ricard gave us one of the best GT4 fights we've ever seen in the wet. This grid, for all intents and purposes, may still actually be quite fresh to the concept of wet racing in the GT4s. It's just not something that has come up all too often, if at all, in this championship. So if that presents a real opportunity tonight, it could be quite an interesting day ahead of us with 90 minutes of racing. coming up not long from now. Of course, before that, 30 minutes of qualifying. And before we get to that, having a look here at balance of performance, finds Audi with the most advantage today. Aston Martin following closely in their stead. 20 and 13 kilos reduced over factory weight from BOP listings today. Chevrolet lose 5 kilos. Mercedes on screen at the moment lose 4, and a single kilo shed away from BMW. Into the weight gain department, then Maserati gain 2 kilos. McLaren, I should say, get 3 kilos. Alpine 14 kilos, and Porsche again on the short end of the stick, 20 kilos on the 718 Cayman Club Sport. At the end of free practice, the first of the drivers to have crossed the line to finish their time here in free practice on the track, as opposed to the pit lane, was George Todd, 4th fastest at the end of this session. And I'm noticing quite a pattern forming here. Chevrolet, Mercedes, Chevrolet, Mercedes, Chevrolet, Mercedes, Chevrolet, Mercedes. That is the first 4 rows here in free practice. And we, of course, know just how popular these manufacturers are. I think it really should stand as quite the example here when you've got, having a look at things there with just recently Adrian Zavala across the line fastest of the semi-pros at the end of free practice. You've got a block of, I believe, looking at it here, if my eyes aren't double-crossing me, 6 cars in a continuous line from 8th all the way down to 13th, starting with Dylan Vecchiere, ending with Ruben Pereira. That's not to include the Mercedes cars that are still up ahead, and 3 of which, with Benton, Todd, and Winnings, intersected by the Chevrolets of Labey, Tanguay, Simard, and Bourne inside of that top 10. Mercedes hold a majority stake heading in towards qualifying today, both on the grid and in the top 10. But still leading that charge, 3-time consecutive champion Christian Labey, a double winner in last week's event over in Kyalami. Then it was David Tanguay to take the Pro Division win in race number 3. Waiting to see where this goes next. Coming up around the corner then, we come to the end of free practice. 30 minutes of qualifying to follow. So we'll be starting off with the AMs, then to the semi-pros, and then to the pros over the course of the session. As we wait for qualifying to start, across the line went the number 27, Brad Peacock, to 18th at the end of this session, as we now head in towards quali. And so now heading in towards the qualifying session here, we do find a very quiet paddock as we get into the AM third of quali. You see Brandon Carr and Thomas Romano leaving. Just up the road ahead of them, though, we do see Didier Potvin looks to be first out among the fray. Behind them is Cedric Grenier-Massey with BMW. Going to catch on board with the Aston Martin, now out on track at this time. We'll go to look on board with Didier Potvin. Taking a look in towards those qualifying predictions for today, once again, only really pertains to 2 categories among all. But what it shows at the moment, Labey predicted at pole position by the end of today's session. David Tanguay in 2nd, Clinton Bourne in 3rd, Wishful Winnings in 4th. A Chevrolet 1-2-3 predicted here in the Nurburgring. George Todd makes 5th for a Mercedes 4-5. Inside of that top 5, Adrian Zavala makes 6th, with Brandon David predicted at 7th, Vincent Simard at 8th, Dylan Vecchiere in 9th, Ruben Pereira predicted in the top 10. So still no dice for the AM category drivers. We'll see what they can make of it over the course of today's qualifying session. Following on board here with the number 35, Didier Potvin. For all intents and purposes, should he cross the line first among the fray here, will be our tour guide here at the Nürburgring GP Strecke, introduced in the mid-80s to revitalise its Grand Prix influence, would ultimately end up locking horns with the Hockenheimring for control of the German Grand Prix right up until its last ever visit to Formula 1 under the Eiffel Grand Prix in 2020. If I remember rightly, the Eiffel Grand Prix was an event, if I rack my brain here, was won by Lewis Hamilton, if I'm not mistaken, in spite of the fact that it was Valtteri Bottas on pole position in that race. It all feels like somewhat of a blur now. 6 years ago was the last ever visit to the Nürburgring. Following on board with Didier Potvin, we see get up off 2 wheels through the Vidal chicane. This is a personal favourite circuit of ours here on TRT, and has provided us with some fantastic racing over the years, making our way out through the Coca-Cola curve. We're on board with Didier Potvin in the number 35 Aston Martin to give us our first lap here at the Nürburgring. Starting things off down the opening straight, we go in towards the run of the Castrol S, otherwise Turn 1, sometimes also called the Yokohama S. Ironic given the fact that until it's combined with the Nürburgring, it's in fact not an S-bend, making our way up and around Turn 2. In towards turn 3 as we enter the Mercedes Arena section. This area is cut out of the N24 configuration, allowing for a slightly quicker run through the GP circuit. You can see the roller coasters in the background there, the large Mercedes Arena structure, clad in the logos of Mercedes-Benz and AMG. Making our way down the RTL in towards the Ford curves here at turns 5 and 6. Making our way down through to Dunlop. Then up through to the Michael Schumacher S's. Fast uphill, turn 9 and 10, so a little bit of an S-bend there for the run up towards Bitt and Warsteiner, sometimes also called the Kumo and Bitt curves. Through turn 11, now into turn 12. These two 90-degree corners set us up for a faster third sector on the run now into it proper. Heading down the back straight into a fast right-hander here, the Hatzenbecksborgen at turn 13. Heading up through to the Vidal chicane. Now, one of two available configurations for chicanes. We've got the faster of two, but it has these two monstrously high curbs, either side of which there you can see getting up off two wheels at the Vidal chicane. Down through the Coca-Cola curve, turn 16 to the line then with Didier Potvin. Across the line he goes, 205.755, our baseline time here. Nearest is the 626 of Cedric Grenier-Massey. Across the line, 1.4 seconds off the beat on his first flying lap, but nonetheless makes second at this time. That's now down to third with Brandon Carr, 32 thousandths away from the fastest time. Thomas Romano makes fourth. Nearest to the line, the number 315, Ray Risti. Across the line there, Ray Risti to fourth in the session. From behind him went the number 15 and the number looking there 692. So that was for Curtis Belbray and Adrian Malherbe of Breaking Point Racing. It is worth noting of the three categories, pro, semi-pro and am, two of which in the team's championship are currently contested by this team against Maloir Racing, so they have quite the sizable influence down in the AMs and semi-pros at this time. We see Brandon Carr still 32 thousandths short of the time set by Maloir Racing's Didier Potvin there. This represents one of a number of aces in the hole by the Maloir Racing team down in the lower divisions. The 35 held strong. Will be the next to set their time set in a moment. So 8 AMs in attendance there, as we saw the time from Karina Stinson, which has been sort of the developing driver picked by Maloir Racing. She was picked up during her time with Aston Martin over on the World Series. Making her way down through to the Ford curves here. It has been a curious line of vehicles over the last couple of months from this one here. First started off with KTM, then with Aston Martin in the V12 Vantage, now with Maserati. Does make one wonder when the World Series rolls around once again, because Season 2 has now been confirmed. What will Karina Stinson be picking next? I put my money on the Jaguar. Nearest to the line, number 35. Didier Potvin, 205.755 to beat his own personal best at this time. Across the line goes 100th up on that, now 42 thousandths ahead of Brandon Carr. With Alpine, number 626, Cedric Grenier-Massey took a win in division last week in Kyalami. Across the line from fourth, stays where he is. Then the triple 8 across the line. Brandon Carr could not yet find the grounds to clear 42 thousandths off of Didier Potvin. From behind him went the number 19. And Thomas Romano stays where he is, also in 7th place with Audi. Nearest is the number 15, Curtis Belbray. Inside of that top 5 in the AM division drivers standings. Down to the line he goes from 6th, stays where he is for the time being. From behind him, the number 692, Adrian Malherbe. In his last lap went 3rd. In this one, just gone now, stays 3rd. Number 800 nearest. It's worth noting between Romano and Stinson, really not too far a gap whatsoever. We're looking here in the scope of about 20, I want to say 23 thousandths of a second. So really not too great a distance to cover on that 4th row of AM drivers. You can see that Maserati is a tremendous handful. Making our way up through the Mercedes Arena section. Well, you know, the Maserati doesn't stand to be among the most competitive options. You can see wobbling its way through the Mercedes Arena at this time, but when it's not doing that, it's doing this. Proper stunt action here from Carina Stinson. It has gone what hell of a note. A tremendous V8, what is highly regarded in the auto community as one of the best sounding V8s in the industry. Maserati Gran Turismo is a car of just simply different mechanics. An absolute soundtrack. I mean, I would say by and large, if we're talking V8s on this game, you are looking at the best sounding among them. I would say a very close second would be up in GT3. The sound of, I want to say it's the sound of, because I'm pretty sure they share the same engine note, is the Lexus RCF and the Ford Mustang. That 5.4 litre NA V8 is just different. We do note there a disconnect from one of the drivers. Having a glance through as to whom it is, I believe... Oh, it skips my mind at the moment, but we are down a driver. We'll hopefully see them reconnect. Brandon Carr, now fastest in the session for Alpine. 3,000ths over Potvin. Now we see reconnecting there. It was Carina Stinson, actually. I don't know, why did that not even cross my mind? I think it's probably the fact that we're streaming at 1 in the morning and I am going a slight bit stir crazy. 5th for Thomas Romano. Now clearing themselves away from Malwar Racing's Carina Stinson. Alpine on division pole with 45 seconds left to spare before we head in to the next 10 minutes of the session, past the 20-minute mark here as we head towards the semi-pro qualifying. You can see some of the semi-pros at the moment standing in the paddock. 30 seconds, but it's worth noting not many of them yet queuing up. That could be changed in the next couple of seconds here. Right now, they don't really seem all that enthused to get out on track here at the Nurburgring. That is a curiosity indeed. We do note there the sound of low humming engines. That does mean someone fired their engine up, and it was Adrian Zavala. So we now head away from the AM section of qualifying into the semi-pros. The first out the gates will be the number 46, and I'll be honest, for a category of what is quite a lot of enthusiastic up-and-coming drivers, that was a bit of a sluggish start. I've seen them queue out the exits before like it's Black Friday. Now that is a curiosity. Nearest is Didier Potvin. Wishful Winnings once again asking us the question, what is their favourite corner? Great question. Oh, what is our favourite corner? That was the question. Great question indeed. It's tough to say because the GP Strecker has got some great moments in it. Chicanes. Do chicanes count as corners? Well, we'll hold on to that thought as we now see a staggering re-entry to the fastest time by division. Didier Potvin, now fastest of the AM cars at the end of their section of quali, and not by a few thousandths, mind you, by 5/10, half a full second. That is quite something. Checking in with the 46 will be the one leading the charge, so we've got to catch on board with Adrian Zavala. We do see the pros at least show some enthusiasm in towards this qualifying session. Let's go to catch on board, though, with the Mercedes cars out on track at this time and looking for him here. Where, oh, where might the Mercedes of... That's a great question. Where is he? Is Zavala back in the pit lane? Am I blind or something? No, there he is. On his way down towards Bitten Warsteiner. Now, back on that question. Favourite corner here at the GP Strecker. Personally, do chicanes count as corners? I would say the Vidal. The Vidal chicane has provided quite a few flashpoints in on-track rivalries before, GT3 and GT4 alike. It's a very, very sort of blink and you'll miss it kind of corner. You'll see it here from Zavala. You really got to commit into this section of the track or it will spit you out. I think it's also because I'm just a sucker for a good high-speed corner, and a chicane is the best of both worlds. You do get, you know, 2 for the price of 1. They're trying to go as fast as possible through that section. It's very fun to watch from that angle, to watch the cars rocket through that S-bend. On board now with Adrian Zavala, the first of our semi-pro qualifiers here, the number 46 on his way down through to turn 1 here at the Castrol S, otherwise the Yokohama S. Making his way up and around the Mercedes Arena section. I would say honorable mention, and this might be a little out of the way for favorite corner, but it's this exit point here out from the run of turn 3 through turn 4 and 5 as we exit the Mercedes arena and onto the RTL, because I've seen some magnificent fighting down in this section before. And a lot of conflict here, though, in the forward curves. We've definitely seen that over the years. Do keep an eye onto this section as we head into 90 minutes of racing. So already having melted through 4 minutes coming up on of the semi-pro portion of qualifying. This is definitely going to be the stress point for that last category. When the pros come out to play, they know they're going to burn away nearly half of their available time just getting on to the first flying lap. When we've got lap times north of 2 minutes across all 3 categories, we do find ourselves presented with very little amount of time to actually play with here, because once we've got out on track, and bear in mind this was a slightly slower start for these drivers here, but even for the upper classes, they are going to find themselves pressed to much the same amount of time. They'll only really get, I mean, speaking here, maybe at a squeeze 3 laps. So we do find ourselves, whether we meant to or not, under the regulations, in somewhat of a WEC-style hyperpole. I suppose befitting then of a circuit that formerly held the 6 hours of Nurburgring in the WEC from, I think it was 2015 to 2017, about 3 seasons. Technically, wouldn't it be? No, it would be 3 seasons. I'm being silly. Down to the line, Adrian Zavala, the first of our semi-pro qualifiers, goes immediately up and ahead of the fastest of the AM cars. 204.941, your new fastest time in qualifying so far. Number 24 nearest. So here comes Chili Peppers of Breaking Point Racing. Down across the line there, goes to 4th fastest in the session. Number 27 across the line a moment ago. That was for Brad Peacock, also of Breaking Point Racing. We do see a significant chunk of BPR talent there inside of the top 10. Joey Fisher pushes them all down a peg as he goes to 3rd. The number 59, Andrew Veldkamp, goes to 9th in the session. And look at that. That is a bizarre little pattern we're seeing there. Semi-pro, AM, semi-pro, AM, semi-pro, AM, semi-pro, AM, all the way down to 9th. Now we see the doubles. Ruben Pereira makes it a semi-pro 1-2 in their section of quali, just over halfway through. Number 61 will be nearest, and whilst we wait for the next wad of times to come on in, we see McMillan down to the line. We are presented with rumours. Now, we can't necessarily validate how accurate they are. It's nearest to the line now, Ivan Sanchez, that there is the rumour circulating the paddock among driver talk of Lebey's possible move to Mercedes. Now, this is a curious one. We can't validate how true these statements are. It's only rumour and gossip amongst the paddock at this time, but it would represent a significant change in mentality for Lebey. He has spent the longest of his time here with Chevrolet. He has been quite vocal of his loyalties to Chevrolet, and has spent the last 3 seasons dominating this championship with Chevrolet. Is it complacency when one is dominant in the championship that it entices him to push the envelope out, to experiment, to challenge himself? Are we seeing the old glimmers of the Christian Lebey we first saw in the NLRL Sunday League, where he would deliberately kneecap himself by driving the V12 Vantage simply out of the love of the game, and that being more difficult to drive meant the successes were all the more gratifying? That could certainly be some food for thought. Adrian Zavala now 8/10 in the clear over Ruben Pereira. 204.272, the new fastest lap of the session. Number 27 nearest the line. Here comes Peacock towards the back of the semi-pro top 10 at this time, but division 3rd in the session, 4th overall. I think it does speak volumes to the performance that Potvin has. It does make one question whether or not Potvin's placement into the AM category was one that was accurately made. Because in retrospect now, we're seeing a driver cut from a distinctly different cloth, challenging the upper categories. I think by next season, we're definitely going to see him up towards the semi-pros. I wouldn't say yet if this stands on the precipice of pro, but even a handful of pro drivers I've seen being given grief before by that 35, so certainly does present a valid case. Across the line there, McMillan to 2nd, so ahead of Pereira But behind Zavala, in what is so far a 1, 2, 3 for Mercedes, behind them is an Aston Martin 4, 5, and 6. Only until you get to Alpine do you find a car with a different engine, as all of them use the same family of engines. The Mercedes M178 V8 in the AMG GTs and the M177 used in the Aston Martin V8 Vantage, both of which 4-litre bi-turbo V8s. You shrink it down to less than half the literage and less than, well, half the size, but half the cylinders with a 1.8-litre Renault-Nissan Turbo Inline 4. The numbers game doesn't necessarily add up all too peachy in GT4. This isn't the land of the Mercedes 6.3-litre or the Ford 5.4. We do have ourselves, though, a fair share of juggernaut-sized engine. We do find ourselves here in the presence of a 6.2-litre naturally aspirated V8, the biggest on the block, the scariest on the block. Not the Mercedes, sorry, the Chevrolet LT1. So far, the nearest to line, number 24, Chili Peppers, now puts Aston Martin in 4th place with Breaking Point Racing. That breaks the streak there off of Didier Potvins' Malois racing car. With 59 nearest, Joey Fisher now starts to break away at the Aston Martin 4, 5, and 6, putting himself in 6th place in the number 59. We are a minute out from the release of the pros into qualifying today. The 616 nearest, Andrew Velkamp, stays in a reluctant P13. Struggling to break the ceiling here on his qualifying performance. Pereira to the line, goes back up and ahead of McMillan to 2nd. These two very close to one another as it stands at this time. 53 thousandths of a second between the pair after Pereira's last lap just gone. Of course, Pereira took victories in Kyle Army's triple sprint race last week. We'll be looking to keep that ball rolling here as he finds himself up at the top end of the semi-pro listings today. Zavala is back in, so that comes about to be the end of his time in qualifying here. But seems confident enough to have division pole in the palm of his hands. Ivan Sanchez to the line. Has done quite the royal number here for Volkianos Motorsports, getting them up immediately into the top 5 in the team's championship. We saw them to be quite the present factor over the course of the World Series with the AM team's champions. 999 nearest, and across the line there starts now the run into the pro section. Just as we cross over the 10-minute mark there, the semi-pros have had their stay. The 999 across the line to 9th place and released onto the track, let loose like the hounds of war, the pro category drivers. And first among the fray appears to be this one here, the number 119 of Christian Labey. Countless race wins in GT4, then 3 consecutive championships in this series alone, with countless more across a multitude of different series. A driver that, by all accounts in this series, seemingly cannot be stopped. And taking a look back in towards these qualifying predictions, because now more than ever it relates to these drivers here as the pros hold 8 of 10 positions in that predicted top 10. We are expecting then, who currently stand among the 2 fastest times, Zavala and Pereira, to be in that top 10 by the end of this qualifying session. Labey looks to take this one into another pole position, but we saw in Kyle Army that wasn't such an easy goal. It was wishful winnings that claimed a surprise pole position. Started at the front of the field 3 times on the trot, but it failed to materialize in the prospect of a race win. Ultimately, the Chevrolets of Labey and Tanguay seized away the opportunity from Mercedes on that day in the pro category. We see though Labey predicted at pole, Tanguay 2nd, Bourne 3rd for a Chevrolet 1, 2, 3. Winnings looking at the 2nd row there with 4th, George Todd behind him in 5th. Zavala and the semi-pros will be looking to stick things close to the midway of the top 10 there. 6th place, the 204.302. Taking a look at his time so far, that is actually under now. The time that he's put on track is under what he was predicted at by a couple hundredths of a second. In fact, 3 hundredths of a second, 204.272. Brandon David looking at 7th, Timada 8th, Vekere 9th, Pereira looking to hopefully hold on to a top 10, given the fact that he's about 3/4 of a second there from Zavala. He's actually looking in the low 205s as predicted there. So going to check in with the 119 away from our qualifying predictions. Going to catch on with the Chevrolet for our tour of the track from the eyes of the pro drivers. The 91 across the line a moment ago to end their time in the semi-pro portion of quali. That was Ivan Sanchez of Volkianos Motorsports in the background. There has been some trouble for the 99 and another driver there. We couldn't ascertain the number, but that was 2 drivers caught in a bit of a scrap down at the Vidal chicane. On board here with Christian Labey. Joining us in the chat at the moment, I believe that is, yes it is, that's Byron Forrest. in our chat at the moment. Former competitor in this series. We had the pleasure of speaking with him multiple times over various Competizione Performance League championships. It's going to be an exciting round up and ahead of us today. It's the start of the major European chapter. 5 rounds spent here in mainland Europe before we hop across the pond to the United States. Racing in Watkins Glen and Indianapolis. Then over to Australia for the penultimate round of the championship. Back to America over in Austin, Texas at the Circuit of the Americas. The first of our endurance races then this season. As one of 4 available event configurations, it's worth noting after tonight's round is when the drop point system will come into effect. And that'll be the first round of drop point systems, as we will have what is currently the single worst round will be negated by round 8. Quite a fair few weeks from now, that will grow to 2 rounds negated under drop points. So that could play some broadly different changes into the various top 10s and top 5s when one includes that this will account the team's championships as well, heading out of this round and closer to the season midway. On board with Lebey at the moment as he makes his way through the Hatzenbecksborg and in towards the Vidal chicane. Up through turns 14 and 15. It's been a very brisk start to quali for this one here. Hunting down yet another pole position. He has been unstoppable this season. There's been a few flashes in the pan for possibilities of other drivers to take home race wins, namely for that of wishful winnings in David Tanguay, but for all intents and purposes, especially through round 2, it was his race to lose. Down to the line, 2:03.507 right off the bat as the fastest time so far. Across the line from behind him went Clinton Bourne to 3rd. Then from behind, David Tanguay goes to 2nd. Pushing Bourne down to 4th, we see Benton in the top 5. Number 21 across the line. We still see, as predicted, Zavala encapsulated in the pro category. Richard Cecil across the line there in 16th of all places. Simard in 3rd. Across the line a moment ago. More drivers down to the line. Vekere 4th. Across the line from behind him there, I believe, is the... Just having a glance there. Kind of difficult to read from this angle. The 23 of wishful winnings. Presently then 4 times unaccounted for, winnings among them, but it is worth noting here, we do have 2 qualifying bans over the course of this event, Brandon David and Aidan Christie, so that'll be why we didn't get to see much of Christie at all in the semi-pros. He's facing a qualifying ban. The same story for Brandon David, so these 2 Aussie talents will sit out quali today, so 3 times unaccounted for, Martel, Todd and winnings. 30 cars in attendance so far in quali. You see the last of the categories out on track at the moment. Dylan Vekere, 161 Motorsports. Among that top 5 in the Pro Standings Teams Championship. I believe it here, a new coat of paint as well on the 161. Quite a big fan of that turquoise. There are 2 colours synonymous to fear in this championship, black and red, and that's been the colours of this one here, the 119 of Christian Lebey. Perhaps it's been the hint of a very, very dark grey over the last couple of seasons, but now we see in his most recent chapter with Chevrolet a full stealth black with red accents on the 119. Out through turn 16, so his own time to clear for the new fastest, 2:03.507. He's 448 thousandths over the nearest car. Across the line he goes. Can he raise the bar here? As it would appear to be the case, waiting for him to cross the timing line, no being the answer. Bourne goes into the top 5, so Chevrolet now with a majority stake in the top 5, 4 of 5 positions. That is 80% of that top 5 alone, and they account for 40% of the top 10, now 50, with the introduction of Karl Martel to the top 10, 8th place in the number 99. The other 50%, their arch rivals at Mercedes, and speaking of, Dylan Vekere puts Mercedes up to 3rd. Sandwiched on all sides by Chevrolet-led machinery. 3 minutes left to go in qualifying. The 161 hoping on the chances to dig deep for maybe one more lap here and see a possible front row start. We are seeing, though, pulling into one side, waning confidence perhaps on the 161 or something we aren't yet privy to. George Todd 8th at the end of that last lap just gone. In the number 12, he's up behind Justin Benton in 7th, and Adrian Zavala stands now as one of only 2 drivers involved in that top 10, and it's almost exactly what we're seeing in the predictions With Zavala 6th, Pereira 10th. That's 2 semi-pros in the top 10 at the moment. There could still be times from wishful winnings. This is the one part of that equation that did not get included. Looking on those podium starts across the other two divisions right now. At the end of the semi-pros, it's Zavala from Pereira and McMillan on the podium for the semi-pros. In the AMs, it's Didier Potvin from Brandon Carr and Adrian Malherbe. The pros so far, take Malwar Racing 1-2. 161 Motorsports' Dylan Vekere holds into that third place spot. It is worth considering, though, in the case of Vincent Simard, he is really not too far off the beat here from a third place start, putting a Malwar Racing 1-2-3 certainly on the cards here as we drop in to the last 2 minutes of the session. We are beyond the point of no return for these drivers now. If they're out on track, these will be among the last laps they spend in this quali session. The gap right now, as Labate, I believe, just has increased onto a new fastest lap. 2:03.482 as he's back into the pit lane. Contempt with his performance, and rightfully so. Just under a quarter of a second away from the nearest driver, that being this one here, David Tanguay, who reveled in victories in the Kyle Army Grand Prix circuit last week at the triple sprint. What were hectic conditions, both on and off the screen. Vincent Simard now down to 5th with the introduction there of wishful winnings. And that does shift things down with now only one semi-pro remaining in the top 10. That's Adrian Zavala. So that sadly quells the hopes of a top 10 start for Ruben Pereira. He will be right behind George Todd and Carl Martel, though, on that 6th row. Coming up in towards today's race. Wishful winnings, of course, still hungry for revenge after being robbed of that opportunity in Kyalami. Things fell apart by the wayside. The Mercedes just couldn't cut the mustard up against the Chevrolets, but now he'll be on the attacking side of it on the run up towards turn one. Similar to Kyalami, very sharp first set of corners here, so worth keeping an eye out towards the Yokohama S's, otherwise the Castrol S's, as we barrel down through to the Mercedes arena. Mercedes home turf here for the AMGs. They are not looking to disappoint. Right now, they are up for a world of pain against those Chevrolets today. Nearest to the line will be the number 6, Clinton Bourne of Milk Crate Racing Chevrolet. Whilst we wait for him to come down towards the line, looking back on towards that calendar out of curiosity here to see what comes up in terms of regs-wise in the European chapter. We'll be quite curious to see how Alton Park fares. We just came from there not too long ago in our coverage of the TRC Sprint Cup EU Series. Snetterton being a 90-minute race could certainly mix things up there. A rare sight to see Snetterton under endurance regulations. Down to the line then we go. The end of qualifying here. Bourne across the line from 6th. Stays there where he stands. The 30 into the pit lane there. That was for David Tanguay. Number 99 is nearest. So here comes Carl Martel off of Coca-Cola Curve. At the end of the pro and overall qualifying session, he stays 10th across the line. Then from behind him, the number 5, Richard Cecil, from 17th, stays there at the end of this session. Christian Lebay on pole here in the Nurburgring in the pro category. It's Adrian Zavala in the semi-pros and Didier Potvin in the AMs. A great qualifying session there, and fair play to Adrian Zavala, putting one semi-pro driver inside of that top 10. Front to back, we're looking at 8 cars by less than a second from Lebay down to Benton. The first 4 rows with an arm's length of one another at the end of this qualifying session. It should make for quite exciting racing up and around the corner, with an hour and a half ahead of us here in the Nurburgring. Taking a look back in towards the regulations before we get in towards racing today. Worth noting then, over the course of this race, 2 mandatory pit stops for fuel, as according to regulations submitted by Race Control. In every endurance race, this will change, so we could see the introduction of tyres into the mix on the next endurance race further down the line at Snetterton. We have a 60-minute pit window here for the endurance races as well. Opens after the first quarter hour of racing, closes a quarter of an hour before its end. So we'll open when there's about an hour and 15 minutes left. And of course, we'll close when there's only 15 minutes left. The timer at the top of the screen that you'll see over the course of this race. Reeling away from an exciting qualifying session, then Christian Lebay on another pole position. Now having this one up and away from Tanguay or Winnings, who had very strong starts to speak of in Kyalami for Winnings. Sadly, that race win did not materialize for him. He's still hunting down another since his maiden win in Valencia. waiting for the grid to form up. Then no news for us to discuss at this moment. As we head up towards the grid, we'll be talking about the lineup of the grid today. Getting up into the formation lap, we'll leave you on with the pole sitter, the 119 of Christian LeBay, and taking a look at those conditions. We said there was the 10% possibility of rain and the sky could not drag heavier with the threat of rain. Look at it there. That is dreadful conditions in the sky above Nurburgring, Germany. Taking a look then on the grid for today with just under 3 minutes left to go before the start of round 4 of Season 4 of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series powered by Malwa Transport. It's Christian LeBay on pole position. David Tanguay in second with wishful winnings in third. Dylan Vekere makes fourth ahead of Vincent Simard, who rounds out the top 5. Sixth place for Clinton Bourne ahead of Adrian Zavala, who heads up the start of the semi-pro field. On pole by division, but 7th overall. Justin Benton rounds out the 4th row on 8th. 5th row for George Todd and Carl Martel. Looking further down behind them then, 11th place for Ruben Pereira. Isaac McMillan in 12th place with Chili Peppers in 13th. Didier Potvin heads up the Amfield from pole position on division, 14th overall. And then Joey Fisher in 15th. Brad Peacock in 16th. Richard Cecil in 17th. Brandon Carr in 18th. Ivan Sanchez in 19th. And the Jackal makes the top 20. Adrian Mallob in 21st. Cedric Grenier-Massey in 22nd. Andrew Velkamp in 23rd. Thomas Romano in 24th. Ray Risty in 25th. Curtis Belbray in 26th. Karina Stinson 27th. Brandon David and Aidan Christie sitting out this qualifying session. Same story for Matthew Shanowski. They make 28th, 29th and 30th respectively. Looking back on board with Christian LeBay. Dark and cloudy conditions, a imminent threat of rain, but nothing yet reported in the first 30 minutes. Of course, those scans are on a 10-minute by 10-minute basis. If anything does come up, we've got upwards of 30 minutes to predict it. I would not be all too surprised if we did see wet racing on the cards today. That would certainly shake things up here. It's among the first ever occurrences of it in this series. We've seen it in other series before, but this grid has seldom gone up against it. 30 cars in attendance. 20 seconds before we get on board with the 119 for the start of the formation lap. We'll catch on with you in a moment's time. As we head on now to the 119, the pole sitter for round 4 of the championship, Christian LeBay, looking for more victories after the Kyle Army triple header last week. Only a single race between themselves today. 90 minutes on the clock. On board with Christian LeBay. We'll leave you with the 119 for a moment and back to you in just a moment. So on board at the moment with the 119, taking a look at possible overtaking spots. There's plenty to find down here at the Mercedes Arena section. Easy opportunities out through turn 2 into turn 3 for side-by-side battling in the very early stages of today's race, as well as later on, depending on the proximity for drivers to one another. On the run down towards the Ford curves, a good run through this section can set one up for a run down towards the Dunlop Curva on the run through to sectors 2 and 3. A lot of follow-through sections, though, in between that major overtaking spot, namely down at turn 8. We've got the run, of course, here at turn 6 and turn 7. Now, bear in mind, a flaky exit from turn 7 could leave you vulnerable for a run on the inside before we even get to Dunlop. Those chances rely almost entirely on user error. In terms of what facilitates a probable overtake, we'll see it down here in a heavy braking zone. Now, hairpins can be a bit of a divisive one among drivers. Differences in line can hopefully create opportunities for the drivers over the course of today's event. especially with the looming threat of changeable conditions. Slim as they are, I would not count them impossible. Another follow-through section here on the run up through the Michael Schumacher S's, turns 9 and 10. And it ultimately gives us another set of major overtaking opportunities on the run towards Bit and Warsteiner, otherwise Kumo and Bit curves at turns 11 and 12. That double 90 left and right is going to allow drivers, especially given how wide that section is on entry, to dare to run up the inside. Watching here over the bonnet of the 119 Chevrolet, you'll see on the run up towards here, it is quite wide on entry. Tightens up past the apex, but then opens out once again. The run up towards Warsteiner, otherwise Bit curve. Off the run from Warsteiner, the run down towards Hatzenbecks. Now, I would predict more likely than not slipstream dependent overtakes here. It's not going to be much that will take the drivers side by side, especially not on the run towards Vidal. The GT3s wouldn't attempt it. Ginetta Cups wouldn't attempt it. It's highly unlikely the GT4s would dare to run the same risks, especially given the fact that in the case of the Chevrolet, they're not exactly dainty. Down towards turn 16, Coca-Cola curve will present itself as a possible opportunity, but in summary, turn 1, turn 3, turn 8, turns 11 and 12, and the possibility of turn 16, you'll be your major focal points for overtakes over the course of 90 minutes of racing to follow here at the Nurburgring. Making our way around turn 16 onto the opening straight here at the former home of the Eiffel Grand Prix. Down to the line then. Season 4, Round 4, the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series powered by Malwa Transport. Here at the Nurburgring, we are green and racing. 90 minutes against the clock then, as we are off into round 4. A great start from the front row of Chevrolets. You can see immediately David Tanguay had the better of 2 runs over his teammate Christian Lebay, will be to the outside of the run down through Yokohama. Straight through to turn 1 in the background there. We can see Adrian Zavala pokes his nose on the inside from further down the line, trying to get a leg up into the top 5 as we barrel down through turn 1. The 616 and the 999 both in jeopardy as the yellow flags fly from turn 1. Side by side in the background, you can see defending his post is David Tanguay away from his teammate Wishful Winnings, who vows for revenge after Kyle Army's performance. From behind him, you can see getting up alongside of the exit of the Mercedes arena, another Mercedes car, Dylan Vecchiere of 161 Motorsports, but a great getaway by the 119 right off the bat. There's been great trouble down the line. You see here amongst the pack towards the back of the field, Brandon David, who sat out qualifying, now puts himself side by side, by looks of it there, with Adrian Malherbe and Brandon Carr. Yes, the 692 under siege as he himself sets the iron sights upon Cedric Grenier-Massey down in the AM category, as we now see the order start to stack up properly. We do note of the greatest casualties among them. We saw was I believe the number 10 there was in trouble. Actually, I believe that, no, it's the number 19, my mistake there. Thomas Romano is among the casualties over lap 1. Lebay leads over Winnings now in what appears to be second. As I say that, you can definitely get a glance and see that Winnings is far from where he's supposed to be. I'm pretty sure that's a UI error that's put him all the way down. Put him all the way up, I should say, in what was otherwise second, because he has now fallen in right onto the nose of Justin Benton, down in what is currently 7th, I should say. David Tanguay holds second at the moment. Simard third. Bourne 4th, Winnings 5th, Benton 6th. We saw for Bourne, was that? Yes, it was him at the wall, and we see in the background as well another driver stricken in that area, trying to rejoin the track, I believe, was the 161. Yes, Dylan Vecchiere at Vidal. 2 drivers, previously components of the top 10, now both relegated from it. In the case, though, of Dylan Vecchiere, we see him all the way down by looks of it to 16th place. In the case of the number 6, way down the order there for Clinton Bourne. That's heartbreak for the Aussie talent. Now down to 28th place after his slip up at the Vidal chicane. It's a Chevrolet 1, 2, 3. Lebay, Tanguay, and Simard. Winnings now 4th. Benton 5th. Zavala leads semi-pro from 6th overall on track. Todd 7th. Pereira 8th. Martel 9th. McMillan in 10th. Richard Cecil in 11th, stepping ever closer to the possibility of a top 10. So we see a lot of the same qualities in Richard Cecil in the GT4s, with especially with Mercedes as of recent, to another driver that we made the comparison for earlier on in our broadcast day on Tuesday over on TRC. It was Tom Wells, a driver that, while may not prioritise qualifying performance, certainly knows how to get things done on track, even from a lower position. We see for Cecil, he's stepping ever closer to a top 10, and we barely scratched the surface on this event thus far, not even 10 minutes in. Tanguay 6/10 away from LeBay, 1.2 seconds ahead of Simard in third, as it's a top 3 lockout for Maloir Racing, a top 4 when one includes that of wish for winnings. But you can see this is a 4th place far less steadily kept than the top 3 in front of him, as Justin Benton looks to take a piece here. Last time we saw him was only a few hours ago over on the TRC Sprint Cup EU Series, where sadly he missed out on the opportunity to take wins ahead of his championship rival Sean Johnstone. It was a double victory then for Ashley Lloyd with BMW, all of which will be made available over the course of this week on the TRTN YouTube channel. Otherwise, you can catch round to the Sprint Cup EU Series 2 weeks from now as we head over to round 6 at Silverstone. So far, they're nearly 5 minutes into round 4 of the championship. LeBay holds a commanding lead here over Tanguay in 2nd, Simard 3rd, Winnings 4th, Benton 5th, Zavala 6th, Martel 7th, Pereira 8th, McMillan in 9th, Todd in 10th, Cecil in 11th. Peppers in 12th, Fisher 13th, Vekere, as it stands then down to 14th place after a slip up at the Vidal chicane. We see here what looks to be the emergence of a fight between Aidan Christie and Brandon David. These two sat out qualifying notably there, and both of them now squabble for control of the last of the top 15 places. A battle of the German juggernauts, Audi versus Mercedes. But one thing the Audi forgets, it's on Mercedes' home soil here as they barrel down through to the aptly named Mercedes Arena section. In the background, we see squabbling here from the AM drivers. Didier Potvin still holds his ground at the lead of that division, but we see swapping hands for position there. Cedric Grenier-Massey, Adrian Malherbe and Brandon Carr. Carr maintains 2nd in division and leads that championship after South Africa at Kyalami round 3. Didier Potvin has got to get a wriggle on here to try and get up past Christie and David, because otherwise he's losing ground by the handful to his championship rival. Looking up through the order here just to get a peek in on the fight for 2nd in the semi-pros. McMillan beat Pereira as it takes a broadly new chapter. McMillan now into division 2nd, 8th overall. Pereira in the number 8, now down to the back end of the semi-pro podium. Behind him, George Todd and Richard Cecil up in the pros. The question is for the 12 and the 5, are they keen to work together to try and get up past the semi-pros and get closer to Martel? Right now, it is a very tough spot when one considers the only non-Maloir Racing car in the pro division amongst that top 10 right now is Justin Benton. So he's swarmed on all sides by drivers who will not be giving him any kind of favours. Right now tries to poke at the shoulder of the 23 to maybe go up for 4th place after 6 minutes of racing here in the Nurburgring. Further down the line then, a lot of the action concentrated outside of the top 10. We see here in the fight going on for just about the scratch in a 10th place is between Todd, Cecil and Peppers. Up in front of them, there is just about one fight in the top 10 at the moment. The attempt for Ruben Pereira to fight back against Isaac McMillan for control of 8th place. This is going to be a very difficult uphill battle when one considers the pressure mounting from behind. Way down the line then, we do see some recent shifts as Ivan Sanchez suffers a disconnect, is back into the pit lane in the number 91. You see for Shanosky, who also started at the back of the field. Such was the case for David and Christie, makes his way now to 25th ahead of Velkamp, Stinson, Risti and Romano. Oh, that's trouble down at turn 1, and it's between the 161 and the 16. In their efforts to fight for 14th place, Brandon David and Dylan Vekere spill over at Yokohama at turn 1, and both of them are now vanquished from a chance of a top 15. In the case of the 161, it was the slower of the two to get going. He drops right onto the nose of the 23rd place Chevrolet of the Jackal with Breaking Point Racing. All of this is just news worth hearing for Aidan Christie, music to his ears, as he sets his sights upon the 24. Chili Peppers at 13th place, but get a look in behind him because he has got a swarm of AM drivers staring him down. First among them is the 35 of Didier Potvin. And with all of them receiving quite a healthy boost in position after that incident down the order for David Vekere, Aiden Christie up through the Schumacher S's, sandwiched in between two Aston Martins at this time. 8 cylinders against 10. Side by side, the 24 from the outside there's going for the inside, goes Aiden Christie, the 32 on the inside, down through Bitten Warsteiner, gets the move up over Chili Peppers, and is now up in towards what is standing here as a Division 5th in the semi-pro category. Great hustle by Aiden Christie. Of course, last season saw his win in the AM category over at the Circuit Paul Ricard in dry and bright conditions. A far cry of what we see here, dark and colder, and the possibility of wet conditions here in the Nurburgring, but nothing yet having materialized. Of course, the weather radars did show there was a chance, but incredibly slim, we're told. But that doesn't strictly mean zero. We've been clinging to that hope ever since, much to the chagrin of the drivers. We are trying as hard as we possibly can to invoke the commentator's curse, because wet racing does sound rather fun right about now. For Brandon Carr, he's got his sights on Peacock in front, as he's the stepping stone as it stands right now in the foreground. Who was that? The 16! Brandon David on a kamikaze shot down through turn 1. That scared the daylights out of me. What was that? They're on the inside, and what are these two doing? It was Malherbe and the 16. Malherbe had his lights off, if I'm not mistaken. What on earth was that? I am at a complete loss for words, folks. That is a bit of a strange one. Meanwhile, up the order, Markle v Zavala on the cards here for 6th. And we note then, actually, no, definitely not the case for Martle, because look at who's behind him there. That's Aiden Christie. So Martle, in the time since as well, having fallen way down the order to 12th. That leaves Zavala out by his lonesome. 4.1 seconds in the lead of semi-pro over Isaac McMillan in 2nd. Ruben Pereira makes Division 3rd. They're 6th, 7th, and 8th, with 3 semi-pros now in the top 10. In terms of the closest fights, we note here the number 12 trying to defend off from the number 5. We do see that's in the wall. That's Ruben Pereira. Yellow flags at the Schumacher S's, and that's Pereira out. A heartbreaking end. It's a blink and you'll miss it. Everywhere we're not looking is where an incident has sadly kicked off. The Schumacher S's have brought about the end of his race today here in round 4. The drop point system couldn't arrive any sooner for Ruben Pereira. That's the end of the road. For that Mercedes, it does mean great news for Joey Fisher, who at this time, while struggling his position alongside and attempting to unlap 91 of Ivan Sanchez, now inherits 3rd. Aiden Christie, that bumps him up an extra step to 4th. For Chili Peppers, he's now in the top 5. Didier Potvin still trying to break away from the semi-pros here, but he is caught in a very tight squeeze between 2 Aston Martins at his front and rear. Breaking Point Racing not looking to make this an easy run for the number 35. Weather radars show it the next 30 minutes will stay dry, but things aren't getting any brighter on track. Visibility will continue to drop. Cecil v Todd still ongoing as one of the closer fights in the top 10 at this time, but we take a look way down the order to see Vekere v Malherbe. Malherbe, whether intending or otherwise, doesn't have his lights on. That's a black and orange flag. Now, sometimes can be brought about from connection troubles where it temporarily blips the car out when it rejoins and doesn't have its lights on. It's either that or Adrian Malherbe forgot which button turns them on. Likely possibilities on either side. We know it's definitely the latter, because he just switched the lights on now. But again, that lack of lights down through turn 1 could have been what caused that accident for Brandon David. I don't know. I mean, missing the braking zone's one thing, but there wasn't even the consideration of brakes in that. I'm not quite sure. I'm not going to point fingers at what I think it is. That's for race control to determine, but something was off about that incident. We see for Clinton Bourne, damage on the nose of the number 6 as he just scrapes his way back into that top 20. Malherbe in front of him, his latest on his target list. Up through the Schumacher S's, the area that took out Ruben Pereira. And 692 still trying to hold ground in a bit in Warsteiner. We see Bourne getting handsy here through to turns 11 and 12. Trying to go for the more aggressive exit from turn 12. That'll give him the run up towards Hattenbecks-Borgen. You can see him glued onto the rear bumper of the 692. Round through turn 13. Very fast right hand. And the Mercedes, well, no slouch. Can't hold a candle to Chevrolet, but I think Bourne's just a little too far away, even if he goes late on the brakes. Few chances exist for side-by-side action at Vidal. It'll be here at the Coca-Cola curve where he'll be looking for an opportunity, but already preemptively gunning for the inside was the 692 of Adrian Malherbe. Solid defense so far. Taking a look further up the order to see here, continued fighting with Potvin and Peppers. Up in front of them, Aiden Christie, Karl Martel and Joey Fisher. Sandwiched in between them, that's Ivan Sanchez. Looking up the order reveals a new fight on the podium between teammates here, Vincent Simard and David Tanguay. And whilst we've made this point many a time where we don't necessarily anticipate too much action from the teammates among the grid, there isn't, I believe, anything written into their contracts that said they can't fight. It's just more of a gentlemanly agreement. The Nurburgring, a track regarded as the Green Hell, and while that's a comment that pertains to the Nordschleife, a term coined by Sir Jackie Stewart, I would say still applies here at the GP Strecker, just given how brutal this much smaller version of the Nürburgring has proven to be. It's taken a lot of the spirit and ethos of this circuit and condensed it down to a bite-sized FIA Grade 1 accessible package. Down the line. Bourne. Now up and ahead of Malherbe. 2 seconds in the clear over the 692. That does invite in the Jackal to be next in the fray. The Breaking Point Racing cars could be seeing action in a moment's time. Closing on under 9/10 out, Cecil from Todd, but it's worth noting that this gap appears to be growing more so than it is shrinking. Richard Cecil, though, I don't imagine he's going to be scoffing at the idea of being in the top 10, given what qualifying gave him was towards the back of the top 15. Anything is an improvement at this time, and division-wise, that would place him actually in 7th in the pros, so really not too bad whatsoever. Into the pit lane goes Karl Martel, but it's worth noting, is that going to be on time for when the pits open? He's just got to slow down here. 3 seconds left to go, and the pits are open.
The pit is now open.
That is time to perfection there. I imagine for Karl Martel, this was more of an emergency stop than anything. Given the state of disrepair on the nose of his Chevrolet, this one was timed down to perfection. He wanted to repair that damage. He knew he couldn't stay on with the damage, but he was going to make it work to his benefit. Very well timed then by Martel. He's into the pit lane, the first of our pit stop runners. Now that the pit window has opened here on round 4. I'd say roughly we've got about 14.5 minutes before we see the bulk of drivers come in. Now, we have seen in endurance races, drivers do like to toe the line a little bit under. We've seen for some drivers, especially when we look back to the World Series, it was a case for that of M. Wright, that had a wonderful strategy, ultimately ended up getting effectively patched into oblivion into the next round when they introduced the pit window, but was able to use a very last of the daring few pit strategy to take home a race win. And while that kind of experience isn't going to exist under the regulations in this series, would not at all surprise me if we've got drivers that already have it in the back of their mind that they're going to gun for the last 15 minutes or bust when it comes to those pit stops, I should say. Where does qualifying come from in all of that? Lord only knows. 2:08 in the morning at the time of recording, so take of that what you will. You see here the battle for second, 30 versus 120, and on the inside, a very wonderful move there. Pulled off by Vincent Simard, but he's not out of the woods just yet, because in the side draft with him there is David Tanguay. Now tucked in behind the 120, looking for a run on the inside. Meanwhile, Justin Benson puts it into the pits very, very early. We'll have to check in with Benson. We see going the long distance at Yokohama. Number 30, way out wide at turn 1. He'll be to the inside at turn 2. That's what this is all about. He'll throw hell and high water into that run at turn 1, so long as it puts him here on the inside at turn 2. Because once you have that, the rest of the Mercedes arena is yours to claim. And back up in a second goes David Tanguay. Looking on board with the 21, unlike what we saw of the number 99, that's no damage on the 21. So this is all strategically minded. The 161 is in. Here comes Vekere. Had a less than ideal start to his race. That's what's brought him in. And from behind him is the 999 of the Jackal. Chevrolet now in. Definitely some curiosity brewing in these drivers at the moment. Vincent Simard now back down to 3rd place after a great defensive second there by David Tanguay. Further down the line, Aiden Christie faces off against Chili Peppers for Division 4th in the semi-pros. The story of Aiden Christie so far today has been quite a delightful one indeed. Started towards the back of the field after serving a qualifying ban after race control decisions made over the course of round 3 of the championship. Did so alongside Brandon David, and where David is now sadly out of this race, Christie still remains. And for a moment here is into that top 10 under strategy. I have it on good authority that Aiden Christie could 100% challenge for a podium in his division by the end of this race. We still have so much time to play with over the course of round 4 of the championship. And behind him, currently facing off with him for control of that 4th place spot, is Chili Peppers. From behind them, the AM leader, Didier Potvin, in the number 35. And from behind him, Brad Peacock in the number 27. 3 Aston Martins, Hassel and Audi for ground off the exit of Bitten Warsteiner. Up the order, just a quick update on the fight between the 120 and the 30. Now that we'll actually see here, in a similar move to what we saw pulled off in the last lap, the 120 is back up into 2nd place. Gunning for the inside goes the number 30. So these two sparring once again. And this time around, the 120's on the inside. A little bit of a bump of the wheels there. Trying to go the long distance in through to the Mercedes Arena section will be the number 30. You can see just how little ground he stands to gain off the exit of turn 2. In a turn 3, he falls back in behind. So Vincent Simard, second time's the charm here in the 120, now holds ground of 2nd. Off the exit of the Mercedes Arena section onto the RTL and then the Ford curves thereafter. Number 30 now falls to the back of the podium. Great sparring amongst the two teammates. Chevrolet squabbling amongst themselves. It's usually the indicators of a fall of an empire, but see for the 120 and the 30, their battle only rages on for the time being. Looking further down the line, the updates from the fighting from Todd and Cecil, 7 tenths and closing as both of them gain ground, significant ground here on Isaac McMillan. Recent trouble for the 61 now forces him in behind the 12 and the 5. Further down the line, Joey Fisher still clinging on behind him then is that of Ivan Sanchez. Aiden Christie has now noted that if Joey Fisher is in range and the gap is shrinking between McMillan and Fisher, not only could he have a stab at 3rd, there is a real possibility, given the recent troubles for Isaac McMillan, a chance of a division 2nd. We say all of this in confidence because you take a look at the amount of time left. You take a look at, conversely, how little time there has been in the race thus far. And Aiden Christie is already in that top 5 in division. Bear in mind, he started at the back, down in 28th through 30th, alongside Shinosky and David. I think that speaks plenty volumes as to the kind of driver we're witnessing here. There was no fluke that brought him into that win in Paul Ricard. And while I wouldn't necessarily say we've got the idea of a possible race win in division on for this one, I wouldn't rule it out entirely, given his performance thus far. Zavala in, following him in there as well, George Todd. That helps to reshape the top 5 now with Richard Cecil among the fray. Speaking of the top 5, we once again see fighting between the 30 and the 120. Again in the Mercedes Arena. Down the RTL towards the Ford curves. I would like to point out as well, having recently got up and ahead of Brandon Cart, was Justin Benton. Looking to undercut a few of these drivers here. We see Zavala on exit, and I believe is about to just get passed up there by Justin Benton in the number 21. So strategy starting to work out nice, neat and tidy here for Benton. We'll be very curious to see how he tackles strategy for the rest of this race, having played his first pit stop so early. Are we likely to see a very long middle stint and a shorter final stint, or are we going to see him follow that pattern forward and go in earlier than the second predicted wave, which would be around 30 minutes left in this race? About an hour and about 37 minutes from now. I'd sure hope not an hour. I'd sure hope not an hour. McMillan v Cecil still on the cards here. Nothing yet speaks volumes to side-by-side action between these two. They're holding their ground, not really that interested in fighting one another. Recent troubles there for Cedric Grenier-Massey off of exit of pit lane. A stop-go 30 for speeding. Now dished out to the BMW of Let's Race mates Cedric Grenier-Massey, a division winner in Kyle Army last week. Now met with troubles here in the single 90-minute race that prevails over round 4. In terms of ongoing fights, the fight for second, one on the cards at the moment. The possibility of a fight for fifth, we do see here readily apparent. A scrap amongst the leading positions coming up on in the semi-pro division. Aiden Christie now with his sights fixed on Joey Fisher. We'll go to catch on board with the Audi. We've been following around several aspects of the grid here, but lasering in on, oh, we see there, actually off the exit of the pits, Curtis Belbray with damage on the nose of his Breaking Point Racing Chevrolet did not elect to fix said damage on the run in towards his second stint. Going to catch on with the Audi, as we did see action from them on the run in towards turn 1. Joey Fisher is now in the iron sights of Aiden Christie. This could prove to be quite an exciting next chapter coming up here as we do get ever closer to the chances of that fight for 7th place. The Audi R8's been quite the divisive package in GT4. And hang on just a moment. I feel like I'm going crazy here. Was that... Where's Joey Fisher? Where is Joey Fisher? That's a great question. He was right there. I could have sworn... Anyone in chat at the moment, please do verify. He was right there. Where'd he go? I think it was a disconnect. I feel like I'm going... I genuinely do feel, folks, like I am going mental there. Was that not the case where Joey Fisher was right there? I'm scouring through this order here, and I can't find anything that supports that. Oh, in the foreground there, that was Curtis Belbray. So nearly found himself in the foot of trouble. Well, the sudden vanishing of Joey Fisher has now introduced us to the possibility of a fight for all intents and purposes right now, second place between Chili Peppers and Aiden Christie. Behind, you can see there Didier Potvin working his way around Curtis Belbray through to the Coca-Cola curve. Clinton Bourne in the top 10. Yes, okay, thank goodness that I'm not crazy. That was a disconnect for Joey Fisher. I'm not, I would like to preface, not thanking goodness that he had a disconnect. I'm thanking goodness that I spotted that it was a disconnect. I really did think I was going a bit mental there, folks. My sincerest apologies. 626 clears their stop and go. So that's for Cedric Grenier-Massey after his penalty dished out for speeding in the pit lane. Now cleared by race control. Into the pits at the moment, Brandon Carr with Alpine. Previously, before he entered the pits, was second in the AMS, leading the AM Championship on the run in towards tonight's race. Still leading that category then is Didier Potvin. The Alpine on an impressive first stint comes in a few minutes earlier than anticipated. Also in the pits now as well, Ray Risti. And I believe also Matthew Shinowski in the 669 in the paddock at this time. You see there, that's a very likely DNF for this one here, Brandon David. Not currently sure yet then for Joey Fisher. He's 24th and closing on this grid. He'll be in the paddock for quite a few more minutes before he's allowed back out. We are noticing as well a closing pack of cars here in for second. Vincent Simard, after his great retake of position and held things off against David Tanguay, now finds both he and Tanguay approached swiftly from behind by wishful winnings. A driver still scorned by the events of the last week of racing, where winnings didn't have it on the cards in the start of this race. After nearly 30 minutes, he's closing in hot on his teammates in third and second. Goal at this time for the 23 at the very, very least today is going to be that of a podium, because right now a chance of a race lead is going to teeter solely on an accident out of the 119. A driver who has so far not buckled in that Chevrolet for 3 seasons. I highly doubt the 1 in a million chance LeBay somehow stacks it is going to cross the paths of wishful winnings tonight. Into the pit lane, the AM leader, Didier Potvin, in. We'll see, following him in there, Adrian Malherbe, a Breaking Point Racing Mercedes, also into the paddock as we speak. Zavala stays out after taking his first pit stop, same for Todd. Romano would be next on the cards here, making his way through Vidal. Does he come into the pit lane being the question? No, elects to stay out. Let's go to catch on board if we can then with wishful winnings, as things do look to hot up in the action surrounding the podium. And looking to locate him at this time, on with the 23. Up towards Bitten Warsteiner, on with wishful winnings, who now sizes up a charge for third. Through Hatzenbeck up towards the Vidal chicane. You can see how much later on the brakes he's willing to go there. Can commit way later on to the brakes. That could serve to his advantage down through Yokohama. We've already seen the Chevrolets are willing to toe the line out a little bit here when it comes to the braking zone at turn 1, but we've already seen plenty there that the Mercedes can outbrake them. And given his distance at this time and his faster lap time than either, but the Chevrolet's now out in front of him as LeBay comes in. This does actually upgrade this fight to second for the time being, with LeBay into the pits, getting things as close as can be to the first 30 minutes of racing. We follow here with wishful winnings on a revenge story of the ages. Disaster for him in South Africa. Could it be turned around here in Germany on the start of the European chapter of Season 4? We had a little sprinkling of it there with the Spanish doubleheader at the start of the season in Valencia and Barcelona. This is where we'll see the highest concentration of European races now for the next 4 weeks after today. Trying to get up and around Shinovsky. All 3 leading drivers then, all still Malwa racing machines. Carve a line through the back row of traffic. 23 still hopeful on the chances of a podium by the end of round 4. We'll catch on with him later on. Taking a look further down the line to see that even after his run to the pit, LeBay, as it stands then, only emerged by looks of things here. By looks of it in the, I want to say the top, definitely the top 10 we're looking at here. I think the results have yet to properly update because we can see up the road from him. Yes, now we start to see it update there. I believe is the scope of 8th place, I want to say there, for actually 9th place when one considers the number 6. So yes, now we see it update. 9th place for LeBay, so still in the top 10 even after his pit stop. That should speak volumes to how much of a distance he was able to carve out on the rest of the field off at the start of that race. We see right now McMillan leads the charge in the semi-pros in the absence of Adrian Zavala, having taken his first pit stop earlier on. Aidan Christie makes second on his comeback charge after a qualifying ban. Chili Peppers hounds him for that second place spot. He's division 3rd for the time being. Looking up the order to now see among the mix there, wishful winnings in second, and actually as it stands gunning for the lead. Later onto the brakes on the inside on the number 30, they bang doors, the 23 and the 30 through turn 1. But ultimately he's fallen right into the trap because the 30 was right on the inside. But going later onto the brakes once again, wishful winnings is leading in the Nurburgring. Now we'll see exactly how this falls in once all 3 of these drivers come to the pits, but until they do, they are leading here in Germany. Given the lights there by the number 30, signs of discontent from his teammates. Recently into the pits then, Milk Crate Racing's Clinton Bourne. Now in, we see passing him up there, having come into the pits only a few laps ago himself, Christian LeBay squeezes back up through the top 10. Christie versus Peppers still on the cards here for the semi-pro second. That story up at the race lead is one very tantalizing, as we now see relegated to the back of that podium by both Chevrolets. What happened for Wishful Winnings? Did he give those positions back by chance? Barreling up through the Schumacher S's. He's got to do it all over again. 57 minutes left to go, 42 of which left in the pit window. And the story only gets more peculiar the longer it drags on here in the first stint of 3 for these drivers. Up and around the Hatzenbecksbogen. See there, way later onto the brakes. Oh, and it's contact from behind. He turns around the 120. Simard turned around by Winnings. Down at Vidal. What on earth is going on here? With the constituents of the Maloir racing team coming apart at the seams. We said it was the start of a fall of an empire normally when teammates start to squabble, but now we're really seeing some bad blood emerge after that accident, supposedly here between the 23 and the 120. A marked man amongst his own contemporaries. Wishful Winnings is definitely going to be, I'd say, likely having some stiff words from his TP later on. That'll be Christian Lebay as well, the leader of the Maloir racing team. Vincent Simard's into the pit lane. Also in is Isaac McMillan. Also in at this time, Karina Stinson with Maloir Racing Maserati. My goodness, you could blind yourself against those taillights. How on earth do they make them that bright? Maserati taking a page out of the book of Audi of all manufacturers, the ones that make those distinctive laser lights on the Audi R8. And Hayden Christie into the pit lane as well. What a sound that is. Hang on, can we just get a look on board? Actually, there was an incident. Hang on, just a tick here. That's the number 5. Number 5 in trouble, Richard Cecil. Smitten down in turn 1. He's back into the paddock. I think that's the end. I don't know exactly what happened for him there. We saw the yellow flags come out, but by the time we got onto the 5, it was already too late. Richard Cecil likely then out of this round of the championship. We do note as well, Joey Fisher is back on the track, so good on him there for getting back behind the wheel. As we mentioned as well, just cutting away here from a fight between Zavala and Todd. 0.4 of a second between each other. Just quickly on a bit of an interlude here with Karina Stinson's Maserati. Because just what a sound that is. Just get a listen on this. Just a tremendous soundtrack there. 4.7 litre Maserati Ferrari co-developed V8 engine, one of the best soundtracks of the Italian auto industry. Wishful Winnings having come into the pit lane, he gave his 2 cents on the incident between himself and the 120. In his words, not great. He was exiting the corner slower than expected. He re-emerges then in behind the 119 of Christian Lebay, who now soars his way back up to 3rd in this race. Chili Peppers in 2nd. David Tanguay stands alone at the lead. 53 minutes left to go. During the time as well, we have seen plenty more pit stops, so we're starting to see a significant reform to what the top 10 looks like at this time. Among its closest battles, we are seeing here Peacock v Vecchiare for 12th. Was previously at 2 temps, now 7 temps. We now see for 2 temps is Todd v Zavala, having come to a head here down at turn, turn 7. at the Ford curves. George Todd now up to 6th over Adrian Zavala. Zavala still likely to retain that division lead once the 24 of Peppers comes into the pit lane. In terms of the closest fights on track, one's just mentioned before, Peacock v Vekere, and then the aforementioned Zavala v Todd are two among the closest at this time. It is worth considering still for Wishful Winnings, as he does fall in now behind Vincent Simard. Could there be a retake of this fight? I'd say if there is, it's going to be far more hesitant than what we saw in their last bout together. LeBay, we are seeing him close rapidly on the 24 of Chili Peppers, just off the exit here of the Coca-Cola curve at turn 16. Down across the line then, Todd, 8 tenths clear of Zavala for 5th at this time. That will still continue to rise. And I would say under strategy at this time here, we are looking at the scope of a podium fight for these two. That teeters on just how quickly Tanguay can get in and out of the pits. He now faces down 50 minutes of racing left to go. We are given information lighting here to the number 5, who I'm told is leaving the pit lane. That's Richard Cecil. A delightful turn of news there. He is back into this race, albeit several laps down. Re-emerges, currently 25th. We'll see where that updates to over the course of the race. 50.5 minutes left to go. Zavala still yet to have found the ground to get up and along with George Todd after losing out that 5th place overall on track. Let's go to catch on board with Christian LeBay, as we do see a battle developing there up at the front of the field. Going to catch on with the 119. Now getting up and alongside Chili Peppers in the bit, and Warsteiner up and ahead over the 24. We spoke about the Maserati, of course, a tremendous 4.7 litre, but this is a sound now far too iconic in this series to pass up. The Pratt & Miller Engineering co-developed Chevrolet LT1 naturally aspirated 6.2 litre V8 engine. A tremendous unit there, derived from the Camaro SS. They sadly couldn't use the LT4 motor, which is in the ZL1, which is the car you see here. It's where the bodywork is based off as well, but that's a supercharged engine, and those are banned in SRO, so they had to divert their tactics over towards their naturally aspirated options. Ford didn't suffer the same problems turning the Mustang into a GT4 with their Dark Horse. That still uses, I believe, a 5.4 from the 6th generation Mustang, the Coyote engine. There was an update to that engine, the Voodoo, but that was discontinued not long thereafter, and they still use the Coyote as their motorsports engine. They even use it up in GT3. As for Chevrolet, with the Corvette, it uses the, I believe, the LT6. So same family of engines, but that one's a 5.5. And it's much higher revving as well, deceptively high revving for an American engine. Sounds almost European. Pratt & Miller Engineering, they are the sort of head honchos for all things mad science with Chevrolet. They can turn any Chevrolet into a race winner. They have done so plenty of times here in GT4 on the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. It seems only befitting then of a championship named with America in its name. That American machinery has took the most amount of race wins. Taking a look up at the front of the field, David Tanguay stands now as the only driver at the head of the field there in the pros, yet to have come to the pits. We see for Chili Peppers, his time could be coming up shortly for the run into the pits. We do know also in the pits at this time is Ray Risty of Team Raceline, as well as Matthew Shinosky, and Ivan Sanchez still remains in the pit lane. We are given information surrounding Brandon David's return to the field, though. We didn't see this one at first glance. Of course, we saw from Richard Cecil, now 25th in the race, that he is back in and racing today. There are high concerns on the charts here for the 888. Just worth noting for the Australian drivers, you can see that their ping is all the way in the red. So Aidan Christie and Brandon Carr, both of which in possible trouble. We do note there another disconnect for a driver, but it was not for who we expected was Ray Risty, currently in the pit lane. That is a great concern for these drivers at the moment. Speaking of Aiden Christie, we can see him right now, Division 4th. Now, his aspirations rely on a Division 3rd in today's race. So far, he's climbed his way up through the order from a qualifying band to where he stands at the moment, actually as part of the overall top 10. In terms of the closest fights on track, it's Winnings v Simard. It's got to catch back on board with these two then. Now looking for the defending angle of two, Vincent Simard. He went toe-to-toe with David Tanguay earlier this race and now goes toe-to-toe once more with Wishful Winnings after their bout at the Vidal chicane a few laps ago. It saw a controversial turnaround. I believe we still have that one on the replays. Taking a look. There's trouble here. In Winnings' words, he wasn't expecting him to be that slow off the exit of the Vidal chicane. That's ultimately what instigated that collision. We see these two now reunited into another stroke of fighting today, sliding his way from the Mercedes arena. That's opened doors up here for Wishful Winnings to get ever closer to the 120 in the ongoing fight for 6th, on board at the moment with Vincent Simard, holding his ground for the fight of 6th. It's in these shorter, straight sections here where he's able to put the hammer down. Let that 6-2 work itself out through Dunlop. Coming up on 45 minutes of racing left to go. That gives us about half an hour on the pit window. Up through the Schumacher S is where maneuverability becomes a concern. The Mercedes can certainly give a lot back. Whilst we've got a bit of an interlude here between some major fights on track, we do have some rather interesting news, as we do quickly just see there. Now back up into the race lead is Christian Lebay, so we just got confirmation of that one now. The number 24 of Chili Peppers is now into the pit lane also during this time. We do have some rather curious news here on TRTM. We are close to signing off multiple new contracts. Some of them are still, as we just heard there, half the race through now. Chili Peppers now in upgrades this to the fight of 5th place. Multiple new championships are likely on the horizon for us here on TRTM. We're still working out the intricacies with our friends over at the No Limit Racing League. Of course, the same place where we've seen the Console Endurance Series and the ongoing NLRL Sunday League is on the cusp of its first ever iRacing series. We're still working things out with them at the moment. So long as we hit sign-up quotas, we will be seeing later on into July, which at the time of recording, it is now the 1st of July, so you'll be seeing later on this month, is the arrival of the NLRL Cup Series, a NASCAR Cup Series that will see us in multiple oval destinations and a sprinkling of road courses at the Circuit of the Americas and Watkins Glen International. It'll be a broad new horizon for us here on TRTN. We also have the possibility of some Nurburgring adjacent racing in the middle of July. That's currently still in the works with a brand new client of ours, of which we are yet to be able to name because we've yet to sign anything off with them. And more news hopefully to follow by the end of this week, so do keep an ear out on Saturday and Sunday during our news wire over on our HCCL, CRL and NLRL. Recent news had it that Orange Line Racing became the 8th new client on TRTN's summer roster. Still on board then with Vincent Simard, and you'll note that during this time he has opened the gaps up plenty over Wishful Winnings. I don't think we're going to be seeing, at least soon, the chances for these drivers to go head-to-head. That's up until they squeeze up against these drivers here, the 46 and the 12, George Todd and Adrian Zavala, because as the smoke clears after that first stint, George Todd has played the mother of all pit stops in his strategy, now seeing 3rd place for Mercedes. Justin Benton, I should illustrate as well, with that far earlier strategy, has played the grid for a fiddle here to make 2nd. And that's massively displaced what is otherwise the 30 and the 120. It's worth noting, actually, for the 30. David Tanguay is now way down in 20th because for whatever reason, I think it was that first pit stop didn't count. I do distinctly recall the 30 having come in. We see that McMillan is now in to serve their last pit stop. So again, following the line of earlier pit stops being the key to success today, as it is worth noting, Hayden Christie is now second in the semi-pros with that recent pit stop by McMillan. I would say you are looking at if he can make his way to the checkered flag here, because there are the concerns for the Aussie drivers' connections at the moment. But if he can make it to that checkered flag, this is very, very likely driver of the day material. Justin Benton is one of the cards there for what is currently a very effective strategy by him. That earlier strategy in the first stint has seen him all the way up now to second place. He actually stands on this grid higher than he did in Alton Park over on TRC earlier today. You'll be seeing more action from us coming up what is technically for our American viewers tomorrow, but for our European viewers later on today on Wednesday the 1st, as we head in towards the next round of the OLR XVSR Midweek Championship. We head to the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps for another bout of racing, following on from Brands Hatch. Later on this week as well, we'll be heading over to Bahrain, if memory serves rightly, over on the OLR XVSR Le Mans Ultimate GT3 Championship on Friday evening this week, BST. Saturday, we'll see 2 rounds for the price of 1. We get to see another round, the penultimate of which, for the HCCL Ginetta Summer Challenge. We head to Donington Park at 2 o'clock PM BST in the early afternoon. Later on in the evening, we get to see another round, I believe the second round of the Continental Racing League GT3 Teams Championship Season 2. As we head over towards, I believe it's Barcelona, actually no, it's Valencia, if memory serves right. Heading over to Valencia for round 2 of the championship. And of course, Sunday, 6:30 PM BST, Season 6, Round 7 of the NLRL Sunday League, live from Imola. Into the pit lanes recently then goes Richard Cecil. As our latest arrival to the paddock, we can see who's that in there behind him. One of the Golden Aston Martins. It's the number 27 on its way down towards the line. That will be for Brad Peacock. You see there joining us in the Twitch chat at the moment, Casey Miles, one of the top representatives of Team Raceline Sim. In terms of the progress of some of the Team Raceline cars, now this is, you have to forgive us here, it's a bit of a loose and fast interpretation of things. We're just judging this off of drivers who we have previously seen work with TRS before. Thomas Romano currently stands in 16th place. Looking further down the line, Ray Risti in 23rd. It's been a bit of a rough race with the 315, but he still soldiers on strong. Right behind him there, you can see the Maserati of Karina Stinson of Malwar Racing. She's on a separate length of today's race. And in terms of some of the other TRS cars, I'm not 100% sure if he is on the team because it's very close colours, but I think they are slightly different here for Matthew Shinosky, but otherwise 27th. Leaving the pits now, Brad Peacock of Breaking Point Racing. Now, looking up through the order does reveal some more rather interesting turns of events. Adrian Zavala drops ground off to Wishful Winnings. These two very close to each other as we see Vincent Simard close ground on George Todd. Into the pit lane goes Justin Benton. So again, following that trend of earlier pit stops, he's played this very, very clever. And hats off really to the American talent because he's seen what the grid's like when they get close to one another. He's seen that this is more a hindrance than it is a benefit to be fighting with the rest of the field. And he looks to try and carve his own line out on the rest of this grid. He's hunting down space on this grid in the little pockets where there aren't any traffic from the back markers. It's very clever. And hats off to him. While it might not be the most eventful race for the number 21, that's not what he's concerned with. His concerns rely on the result. And after trouble in the last week, he will be looking to set that record straight. In the absence then of Justin Benton, this does upgrade Todd and Simard's fight to that of second place. Back on board with the 120 Chevrolet. As we now look at the fight for second place among teammates at the Malwar Racing team. Vincent Simard in one corner, in the other, George Todd. It's worth noting over there, that is the number 23 still close by. So any slip-ups here and his possible fight for second immediately invites in Wishful Winnings, who we have seen already is willing to move hell and high water, or heaven and earth, I think is the more fruitful expression of it, to get up into that top 3. We have just got news there, and it's the worst news we were thinking we were probably going to hear here, and we really were hoping it was not going to be the news we wanted to hear today. That's from the Triple Eight. Brandon Carr is sadly out of this race. He has taken a disconnect. We don't actually know if he's yet back on the field. I don't suspect he will be. That's heartbreaking. This is the kind of news we weren't hoping to hear. We knew there was a real possibility for some of the Australian drivers to have disconnects today. We saw that their connection was in the red, and I'm sure they, like us, were willing to accept the risk and keep soldiering on. Whatever happens, happens, but that is just heartbreaking. The Alpine couldn't have hoped for a better time then to have that disconnect, because the drop points come into effect after this round of the championship, so this is going to work for them quite wonderfully. Of course, in their mind, I'm sure it'd be a case where they'd much rather try to fight things out on track. We do see here a Simard right up onto the back end there of George Todd. We see on the inside, this isn't actually for the fight of 3rd place here with Wishful Winnings. Leaps for the inside. Now, again, we've seen this proven before. The Mercedes cars, at least for the GT4s at the moment, are among the best under the brakes. And we see that Winnings knows this better than anybody, because not only has he leapt over one of his teammates, he looks to use that as a springboard to catch up to the other. Off the exit of the Mercedes arena, the Chevrolet of Simard still holds on, but this is now a 3-way split for the fight on 2nd place. The question is, in the mind of Wishful Winnings, is this confidence or is it insanity? Because it's easy to assume a driver understands the parameters of the machine down to a perfect T on every corner on this track. It's another thing entirely to assume that they're just plain mad, and there you can see it. A shoulder check by the number 23 on the number 12. He sticks the hazards on, and that's a free and easy second for Vincent Simard. He didn't have to do anything for that one, just had to wait for the others to slip up. So perhaps our point rings a little closer to home than one would have expected. Was it a calculated risk, or was it just plain mad? Number 16 back into the paddock there. That could be the end of the road for Brandon David. A heartbreaking story after his huge spiral down at turn 1 earlier on in this race. We also get information to light there. The 119 is in on an earlier pit stop, likely mimicking the same strategy utilized throughout today's race by Justin Benton. Only time will reveal to us the answers on what his strategy is exactly looking like. The 120 holds his ground and looks to go up into the race lead. We see for the 2 Mercs in behind him, Todd V winning side by side off the exit of turn 16. And number 12 will have the better run on the opening straight, but it is worth considering. That 23 knows a thing or two on going on the inside down at turn 1. But as we've come to find it, that's not actually the best place to put oneself. You'll see here with the 23, more than happy to accept the outside at turn 1, because so long as he can stick himself alongside with Todd, which sadly doesn't appear to be the case at this time, he would find his way to the inside here. Todd's actually done this quite wonderfully. It looked like an odd line on paper off the exit of turns 1 into turn 2. But that was actually probably the best line he could have took to defend that position away. We find 3 Mercedes cars now squeezed in on that fight for third, with the introduction of Adrian Zavala, the semi-pro leader, back into the mix. Noting then, LeBay out on track just behind them. That places Simard in the lead, Todd second, Winnings third, Zavala fourth, LeBay, I believe they're in 5th. So that does successfully thwart the counter strategy by Justin Benton, but I'm pretty certain that still places him, as far as things are concerned here, in a 2nd place spot when everyone else serves their pit stops. Of course, there are still quite a fair few drivers to do so, but there are still quite a few drivers who have served both. LeBay, Benton, McMillan, Potvin, Peacock, Jackal, and Grenier Massey, as well as Belbray and Sanchez. Ray Risty's in the pit lane to survey stop go, 30-second penalty. We noticed a bit of a blip there for this one. The 669 of Matthew Shinosky. That looks like some possible connection troubles. On board here with Aidan Christie. I mean, this has been one of the most inspiring stories out of semi-pro today. Started on a qualifying ban, didn't get to put times on chart, started towards the back of a 30-car grid. He's in 8th overall. He's in Division 2nd in the semi-pros. Is there anything Aiden Christie cannot do when he puts his mind to it? That's the real question. Last of the old guard then for Audi. A dying brand in GT racing. That's unless they suddenly decide the Nuvolari is worth developing into a GT3 car to go toe-to-toe with Lamborghini, but the nepotism of the Volkswagen Group would likely keep Audi from being able to do so. That's why their only main performance market is in cars that Porsche and Lamborghini wouldn't dare to make. That's been the same line of thinking in the Volkswagen Group that killed off the Audi TT and now recently the Audi R8. Anything that would detract sales from Porsche and Lamborghini is a direct threat to overall revenue generation. And this sadly corporate and business-focused mindset is what's killed off many great projects by Audi over the years in light of alternatives at Porsche. You see here, oh my goodness, that's trouble. That's the number 12. Into the wall, George Todd. Down to the forward curves. Wishful Winnings takes up the helm of second. But they were side by side when things went very pear-shaped between the 23 and the 12. Dragging gravel with him back onto the track there. A smitten number 12. George Todd staggers to get the car back onto the track there. That is horror for the Mexican talent. Curious to know exactly what happened between those two down there. I'm sure we'll get an update on that from Winnings when he comes back into the pit lane, but that is a sudden turn of events I don't think any of us were gearing up for. These two were close, yes. Very close, some could say. Was that incident among each other, or did we catch them just at a bit of an awkward time when Todd was likely already on the run out of control? Either theory is plausible, but I'm sure we'll get answers to it later on, either in this race or by the start of next. But in terms of Wishful Winnings, I wouldn't say it's impossible going to catch on board here with the 23 that now darts to the pit lane. I would not see it impossible that he's going to be likely picking up some kind of penalty after today's race. If race control, and we've seen they've been very strict when it comes to contact. Right now with Winnings already a marked man amongst his own team. Horror stories to think what the race control team are going to think of it. Adrian Zavala moves to second. LeBay onto the podium. George Todd stays out to try and retake some lost ground here from Winnings. Goes up to fourth. Justin Benton now up to the top 5 as he passes up Winnings from the pit lane. Looking down the line to see where the nearest fights could be coming from, we do find a rather scattered grid. You heard the sound of sifting gravel in the background, and that was from, I believe, the... It wasn't the 999, sorry. It was the 888. So that's fortunate news that he is back on the grid there for Brandon Carr. That was quite sad news to hear that he had fallen from second. He is now back on the field. Currently division, as it stands there, 6th in the AMS. That's likely where he'll stay for the rest of this race. Carl Martel in the pit lane as well. We see the number 23 on exit. All he had to say about the incident down at the forward curves was that was very tight. So likely then was a case where the number 12 ended up in that situation by himself. The two were side by side. He stepped onto the grass and whatever happened, happened. Of course, race control will see it from all angles. We've only got one, sadly, as we're seeing all of this for the first time. They've got all the data to look it over countless times. So we see the 99 on exit. Short exit there to the pit limiter line, so straight down onto the hammer on the 99 as he rejoins the track. Up and ahead there by looks of it of, I want to say that is Isaac McMillan, but he gets the run on him around the outside at the Yokohama S. Here at turn 1, that'll put him to the inside at turn 2, so side by side between Martel and McMillan. Martel looking to try and run things from the long way around on the 99 here at the Mercedes Arena. If he holds his ground here off of turn 3, he'll be on the inside into turn 4, but he's just ran short of it there. McMillan takes up ground ahead. LeBay now up to second with Adrian Zavala darting to the pit lane. George Todd stays out for another lap longer. Justin Benton will continue to rake in more and more ground, as now he'll move up to 4th. 27 minutes left to go. We are about looking here 12 minutes away from the closure of the pit window. That means any further stops will not count towards a mandate and will only just slow the drivers down there. That's Jackal. A huge moment of compression as his car got air out through turn 1. And that was a bit of a half spin for him. Drops him right onto the nose of Shinovsky, trying to unlap. But Jackal, it sets him much further away from Thomas Romano, gives a bit of breathing space between Romano and Jackal. Ultimately, that position will still be Jackal's to claim because Romano has one more pit stop to play. Speaking of pit stops, Pepper's now in as Zavala leaves. Aiden Christie, as it stands at the moment, now takes the lead of Semi-Pro, but he too has one more pit stop to serve. If I had to guess what the strategy is here for Christie, he is going to try and run this as late as can be onto that 15-minute mark. I imagine just in his efforts to try and wring as much possible time out of the 46 in the hopes that he's got enough ground by the time he comes in to stay at least close enough to fight, if not ahead of the 46. But I'd say it's more likely the former chance over the latter, given his situation. Dylan Vekere is right behind here, also yet to have taken his pit stop, currently 6th on the grid right now. Among the closer fights on the track at the moment, but this is the closest. We see there the 61 versus the 99. Now comes to a head with Martel reclaiming ground for 11th. Peppers rejoins now to what appears to be 10th on the grid. Simard is now in, so worth noting there, the 120 comes in as the 119 retakes the race lead. 25, just under 26 minutes left to go here in the Nurburgring on Season 4, Round 4 of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. Dylan Vekere on closing distance to Aiden Christie. Will this likely be Vekere's in on the pit lane? No, surprisingly, it's Christie. Against our original claims that he might try and run this to the very bitter end, he's actually playing things a lot more pragmatically. I think it's because he knows that the chances to fight with first, while as great as they are, aren't worth the risk over just being on the podium alone. More pragmatic approach to things, and given the amount of ground he's already covered, you can't really blame him for not wanting to go all in on a very hefty gamble. Simard's on exit now from the pit lane. Also in at the time is George Todd. You can see there, closer scope at some of the damages he's had over the course of this race. Now just over an hour through, an hour and 5 minutes into this race. 10 minutes left to go on the pit window. It will close thereafter. 25 minutes left to go in the race. Also in the pit lane at the time, number 30, David Tanguay, was really ran into quite a cinder block wall on strategy today. Now gets his first of 2 valid mandatory pit stops sorted, but he still has that pesky extra one to play. So there are possibilities to see him out of the top 20, which means in the position here of Karina Stinson, with drivers still up in front yet to have come to the pits, that being Fisher, who suffered a disconnect, Tanguay, who for whatever reason still had 2 pit stops to play, and Romano, at the best of times here, that Maserati could be up to 17th. The 32 emerging from the pits, and do my eyes deceive me? Yes, they do, as a matter of fact. Zavala is in the lead, but Christie is in a very close second here. A few other cars squeezed into the mix. That's multiple different divisions there crowding up behind him. Let's go and have a glance in to see who is along with the 32. See, among them is the 888, as well as the number 5 and the number 30. And that's the number 12 along with them. You see there, George Todd is the one pressing Christie for position here. 8th place up for grabs between the two. Heading up and around the Schumacher S is the Audi. A little bit sluggish there on the run through. That ultimately holds up the number 12 for a little while longer into Bitten Warsteiner. It turns 11 and 12. Through to turn 13 in a moment's time at the Hatzenbecksborgen. Now, will this be a hard for 8th place, or is Aiden Christie, as we've seen with other multi-class championships before, and I say multi-class in terms of the driver classes here, will it be a case where he shifts over? We saw was much a similar approach of Richard Cecil in his fight for the AM Championship title over on the World Series, where he wasn't looking to get his elbows out per se and antagonize the rest of the field if it didn't pertain to his own post, as it were, for position. George Todd moves up to 8th over Aidan Christie, currently 9th. And taking a look at the order right now, one last puzzle piece in the top 10 rests here with Clinton Bourne. We see close fighting between McMillan and Martel, now entering a new chapter with McMillan at its head again. These two have had quite the lively battle just outside of that top 10. Isaac McMillan, Division 4th in the semi-pros. Carl Martel leaps for the inside down at Yokohama. Does he hold the ground? Certainly so. You see now frustration continuing to mount in the 99 because this is the second or third time now he's had to try and retake ground off of Isaac McMillan. He is starting to, I imagine, get a little bit more frustrated. As it stands right now, as we close in on the last 20 minutes of racing, we do note that Richard Cecil, now having cleared their final pit stop, leaves the pits alongside the 119 here of Christian Lebay. He leads the charge for Chevrolet. Justin Benton's in second until he pits. Clinton Bourne is in third. Otherwise, that'll be third for Vincent Simard. Wishful Winnings, not too far behind at the moment, soon to be up to 4th place himself, currently 5th. Zavala leads semi-pro, with Vekere in 7th behind him. Todd in 8th, Christie 9th, Peppers in the top 10. Martel in 11th, McMillan in 12th. Leading the AM category is Didier Potvin. This has been a strong fight for him here. What's worth considering that Potvin had quite a few hardships in the AM category over the course of Kyalami. And this has been quite the tough last couple of weeks for the 35, but he does find himself now with the liveliest of all chances to retake his post at the lead of the AM category. Before today, that was led by Brandon Carr, who has had quite a fair few issues connections-wise that otherwise would have kept him from P2. That would have been plenty enough to defend his post at the lead of the championship. Thomas Romano now in the pit lane with Audi. That'll invite here, this one. Cedric Grenier-Massey ever closer, but as Romano drops from the jacks, Grenier-Massey just makes his way through Vidal. So unlikely to be close enough to intercept for that division second. Romano could hold on to this one in the number 19. If I'm not mistaken, one of the constituents of the Team Raceline Sim group. Grenier-Massey with his lights still off, showing the black and orange flags by the marshals. Not that he can see them. The run down the opening straight. You can see in the foreground there, holding short down through turn 1. His courtesy maybe is undoing there, as that has invited in quite a few seconds of distance in between himself and Cedric Grenier-Massey. Now looking further up the order to see ongoing fights here. Vekere v Todd has quickly come into frame here, down through the Ford curves, side by side on the run up towards Dunlop. Now for the inside, the number 12, likely to go later onto the brakes here. Does do so. The 161 plays things a little bit more conservatively. Holding his ground, but ultimately filters in behind. A great move then by Todd. Textbook run down through the Dunlop Cura, up through the Michael Schumacher S's, with 19 minutes left to go in today's race. George Todd on a campaign of his own here, now recently up ahead of 161 Motorsports is Dylan Vekere to 7th place in today's race. There still presents itself the curious case of only a handful of more drivers. Shinosky is in to serve one of 2 still available mandatory pit stops. Joey Fisher exits the pit lane as Shinosky enters, but there still remains the case for this one here. The number 6 of Clinton Bourne, Milk Crate Racing's number 6 car, has 3 more minutes to serve that second mandatory pit stop. Otherwise, the door will be closed forever. So if I had to take a running chance at what his strategy looks like, it is going to be this lap. I don't imagine the number 6 would be daring enough to try and run that strategy out to its very end, because he has got to get this one timed to perfection here. The number 669 picks up a stop go. That'll be for Matthew Shinosky. So today's session for him has only gone from bad to worse. But still adamant to soldier on over the course of round 4 at the start of the 5-week-long European chapter of Season 4. Right now, among the closest fights is one here between Curtis Belbray and Richard Cecil, and as we catch them on the previous interval showed 3 tenths, now with Cecil up into 20th, Belbray behind by 9/10 of a second. Still presents the curious case over this one here. Will he come into the pits on this lap, or is he going to try and run things out to an impossibly close margin? That's all on the number 6 to decide on the way through the Hatzenbecksbogen. What will it be then? Control versus risk. What does the number 6 fancy doing here in the Nurburgring down through Wiedel? And into the, yes, by the looks of it, into the pits there, the smart option for Clinton Bourne. As it would happen to be the case, he would be chasing down less than a minute's worth of time if he stayed out onto that extra lap. A risk far too close for him to want to run at this time, given how much ground he's been able to cover over the course of today's race. The number 6 is in. That's Simard now up to 3rd place. Wishful Winnings now up to 4th. Adrian Zavala will shift to the top 5. Carl Martel, with sights now on what looks of it here, Chili Peppers, gets up and alongside. Up in behind him in there, that's Andrew Velkamp. Side by side between the 99 and the 24 goes the long distance around a Hatzenbecksbogen. Now into Wiedel, another position gained for Carl Martel into the top 10. Bourne on exit. So you see there Martel lapping on past the Maserati of Karina Stinson. Bourne is back out on track here. Impressively so. And when you consider, I believe, looking at it here, he does emerge ahead of Carl Martel. So that does mean one thing for certain. Clinton Bourne is still in that top 10. With Martel effectively serving as the sentinel of that top 10, the marker by which anyone behind him is out of that top 10 entirely. We didn't see him past that number 6. We'll see exactly where Clinton Bourne is a little later on. We do see here close fighting alongside with Chili Peppers. That does invite in an opportunity off of Isaac McMillan. This would be for the semi-pro podium. Oh, hang on a tick there. That's trouble. The number 32. Was that the number 32? Yes, there was a spot of bother there for Aidan Christie. I believe was in his efforts to lap traffic. Ran into a spot of bother. He still holds division 2nd. But there, you can see in from behind him. The gap. Actually, hang on a tick here. No. No, as a matter of fact, he has lost that division 2nd. Because now up to division 2nd goes Chili Peppers. Aidan Christie, as it stands right now, is in division 4th behind McMillan. And that of Chili Peppers. That is disaster. But fret not yet, because he has, by looks of it, 3 seconds to clear up to McMillan, and that's still in arm's distance from Peppers. The chance to return to 2nd is not off the cards. We must consider he's bounced back from a lot worse today. I don't think one prang at the Mercedes Arena is going to be the requiem knell on Aidan Christie's performance. We'll catch on with him later on, as now a new chapter of his journey back up to what could very well be a division podium kicks off once again. Seeing here with Vecker AV Bourne, the 161 versus the number 6. In control of 7th place as we face down from the point of view of the race lead. Looking at it, about the scope of 7 more laps of racing at a squeeze there left to go. We'll see though for LeBay as he makes his way towards turn 13 at Hatzenbeck's. Exactly what that parameter's looking like by the end of this race, when we're seeing times in the low 2 minutes. Anywhere between, I'd say, sort of 203, 206, I would say, is that range of times at the moment. As we make our way around, we are looking at the prospect of about 6 more laps worth of racing from the perspective of the race lead, right up behind the number 27 of Breaking Point Racing's Brad Peacock in 14th. That's division 5th by local technicality. Bourne v Todd. What are the odds on this fight here? 1.4 seconds. So we saw that advance from what was 1 second. So it does imply a bit of a slip in the first sector for Todd. But he has quickly regained the ground. Becquerel, 1.1 seconds now as it stands. So distance growing between himself and Bourne. Up through the Schumacher S's, you can really get a semblance of how much distance now is starting to form between the 6 and the 161. Try as he may here, Becquerel is going to have to dig very, very deep to match the Chevrolet pound for pound. It's worth noting in the pit lane at the moment is the 669 of Matthew Shinosky, serving the last of his pit stops. Into the pits then goes Shinosky. He's got a catch on board with a recently advancing fight here between Clinton Bourne and George Todd. Looking here from the defending angle. 0.9 of a second. Currently the gap between Bourne and Todd. Taking a look around the field again to see where other fights may be coming from during this time, as the interval timings aren't always the most reliable sources of information for us as they update on a sector-by-sector basis. A lot can happen in between some of the sectors on this track, especially here at the Nurburgring. Checking back in from the other half of this possible fight for 6th between George Todd and Clinton Bourne through the Schumacher S as we go. 1.1 seconds from the point of view of the number 6 through to Bitten Warsteiner. Right now in the pit lane, Shinosky and Cedric Grenier-Massey, as it stands to be the case at the moment. It's worth noting for Shinosky, he's too late. In terms of serving that second mandatory pit stop, is beyond the pit window. That closed 5 minutes ago. So I think for Shinosky, it's just a soft retirement. For the 669, there's not really much he can do at this time. See there for the number 6, this huge bounce off the exit of turn 1. It's the problem when you take that corner too shallow on the inside. There's this huge drop away, and that's what leads the back end to bounce, which we saw in some cases can step the car out wide. We saw that for, I believe it was the Jackal earlier on this race. Around the field, we see there, that's the end of the road by looks of things here for Shinosky. If he stays out in this race, I'm pretty sure it is a penalty, and a sizable one at that, at the end of this race. We note the 315 is in trouble. That is a yellow flag at the Mercedes Arena, and the 315 is out. The 315 withdraws to the pit lane. That's Ray Risty. Team Raceline could be down another car in this race. The 315 looks to be out of round 4. We hear the distinct sound of an engine revving up. That's a 6-cylinder if I ever heard one, and that is from the BMW. Cedric Grenier-Massey, he's back out on track. Very throaty 6-cylinder, I should point out as well, in that BMW. Now, previous generation M4, technically the first gen M4. The latest one, I believe, is the G80, which we see up in GT3. I suppose not particularly a hot take, but the better looking of the two M4 generations thus far. I'm not really sure I'm keen on the coffin grille we've now got on the new car. It looks better on the GT3 than it does on the road car. That's my take of the matter. One of these in a nice Yas Marina blue. Not a big fan of the Austin yellow, a little too green for my tastes. But away from conversation surrounding BMW, looking in here with Mercedes. 1.6 seconds ahead of Clinton Bourne. George Todd has worked tirelessly to maintain that gap, now bringing it up an extra 0.2 of a second as we are 8 minutes left to go here in round 4 of the championship. in the pit lane then. A dire state of affairs. The 669 and the 315, by looks of it, soft retirees of today's race. Among several on what started as a 30-car grid. Here in round 4 of the championship, the Nurburgring has been a brutal offering to the championship on the first Enduro of the season. In the case here of the 119, we face down what looks to be the case of 3 more laps, of perhaps even 4 more laps, with some overlap into its 4th of racing left to go here from Christian LeBay. Meaning on our predictions, the race will end on lap 43. Technically on the run in towards lap 44. We do find ourselves, as such the case for many an endurance race, no matter the circuit, with a very widespread grid. Not particularly much to speak about during this time. So once again, we rely on the benefit of foresight to take a look back at the calendar. We'll be taking a look at it once again after the race is concluded, but glancing ahead as we head back onto the standard format at the Red Bull Ring, that could serve to be quite the right, but where our focal point shifts is Zolder to Snetterton. Snetterton, as we now know, as an almost universal rule of thumb here on ACC, has provided us with some of the best racing we have seen across both GT3 and GT4, as we catch on here with the race leader, both in pro and overall. Where I'm at my most curious, outside of Snet, is Alton Park and Zolder. The shorter, snappier races, we saw it demonstrated in Barcelona and Kyalami, albeit we didn't get to see much of race 2 due to technical problems, were quite spicy races indeed, especially for the lower divisions. Even up in pro, did we get to see new winners in Kyalami in the form of David Tangwe taking his first victory since Season 3. So there's a lot of hope there for 2 very small circuits like Zolder and Alton Park, where things could really get quite claws out. And that would be much the same story when we head to Bathurst in Indianapolis, as we head through the American and Australian chapter at the end of the championship in rounds 10 and 11. It'll be conditions much similar to this. 90 minutes of white knuckle, boots on the ground kind of racing to finish the championship off in Austin, Texas. And see if the championship doesn't get wrapped up by that point. We've got 3 more laps here from Christian LeBay. We'll catch on with him a little later onto that final lap. Taking a look here to see recent advancements on the fight between Todd and Bourne. As a matter of fact, with the opportunity there to go straight on to the number 6. We saw in their last interval brought them to within a second of one another. You can see massive fluctuations just as we caught on board, from 1.4 down to 1.2. Something is not quite connecting in that first sector for George Todd. That's what's hemorrhaging him so much time. Whether it's the run out from Sector 3 into Sector 1, where that interval marker is at the start-finish line, or whether or not it's just out of Sector 1 into Sector 2, whatever is happening between turn 16 and turn, I believe here, turn 8, just isn't connecting the way he was hoping it to, at least on the run towards lap 39. See, though, it's quite the contrary here, because out through turn 16, he's got a great run of things here, now north of 2 seconds over Clinton Bourne. 205.520 in the last lap to a 206.492 by Bourne, so to advantage there is Todd. 1.8 seconds, so having lost 2 tenths on the opening straight alone, that's just from the Chevrolet having so much more power out range. Unlike GT3, there aren't any regulations in force to limit the power on that engine, such as what we see in LFM BOP for the Ford Mustang up in GT3. The Chevrolet gets to play with all the power it's been given by the folks at Pratt & Miller Engineering. As what is emerging among the closer fights on today's grid as we do barrel in closer to our last couple of laps. I believe we've still about 2 more from the point of view of Christian LeBay. Next lap coming will be our penultimate here on round 4 as things do simmer down a tad. As I say that, having a look here on with Romano and Tangwe. And it goes to show how unreliable the interval timings are, because that showed them a second out. As we caught on with them, you can see they're right on top of each other at the Mercedes Arena. Romano now drops to 17th, Tanguay to 16th. It has been a real topsy-turvy race for the number 30. He was up there in the height of the podium fighting with the 120 and the 23. It's all gone pear-shaped thereafter. Meanwhile, seeing here for Bourne v Todd, again, that 0.9 of a second gap sneaking up under interval timings, but we go to catch on board with the two. How likely is that to reflect the accurate standpoint? For the first time, it actually is rather accurate. It was 0.8 as we caught on with them through the Vidal chicane. Now through Coca-Cola curves, same story. Are we seeing an advance here onto the penultimate lap of racing to a possible chance on 6th? In the last lap, it was advantage to Bourne, and by quite a distance there, nearly a full second faster than George Todd in the last lap. But don't get too cocky there. We see way late on the brakes for the number 6. That's not going to help him. As now you see there, that gap flies all the way up to nearly double from 0.8 to 1.5. Even had a stab there at 1.6. You see from the 119, kicks up off of 2 wheels through Vidal. You can see just how quickly he's able to rocket down through that section here. Christian Lebay facing down one more lap here in round 4 of the championship. Also holds at this time the fastest lap of a 2:03.622.
Okay, the leader is on the final lap now. Give it all you can.
So Lebay commences the final lap of racing here at the Nurburgring. A hard-kept 90 minutes of leading in his category. Played the strategy to a T, but I'd say really hats off here to Justin Benton for working his way up the order under strategy. He's played the thinking man's game, but the rest of the grid's concerned with checkers. This one's chess. Keeping an eye here to a previous fight. 1.3 seconds now the distance between David Tanguay and Thomas Romano, and that really does seem to continue to grow at this time. In terms of the prospects of a fight there between Todd and Bourne, 1.7 seconds. So I think Todd has just got this one by the skin of his teeth in today's race. Lebay. Oh, hang on a tick here. That's trouble for the 19. That's Romano. That is Thomas Romano in trouble. We heard the sound of a V10 climb to red line, and it was just behind the leading 119. So that was the 19. Does that invite in Richard Cecil to the opportunity for position? It shows he's 2 laps down, so I'm not so sure that's the case. We wait to see, though. Going to catch on board as we head up into the last sector here with Christian Lebay. And looking back through the last couple of rounds here for Lebay, of course, in his previous visit to this championship in Season 4, Round 3 at Kyalami, he collected on 2 victories across that triple header, collected on both victories in the dash races on Round 2. Currently stands in this season alone with 4 wins in category. Sets his sights upon a 5th. Making his way down towards the line then here on the final lap, heading up through to turn 16. Another dominant performance by the 3-time champion. Continuing to toe the line further in his control of the pro standings. Down towards the line then, the checkered flag is out. Christian Lebay wins in the Nurburgring. Brilliant performance then from the 119, as to be expected. It's textbook from the Canadian talent. Unmistakable with that Chevrolet. Down towards the line then to see the rest of the podium. Justin Benton. I mean, hats off to this one here. The American talent has played the rest of the grid for a fiddle today under strategy. He's the thinking man of this grid. The mad scientist in the 21, making his way up through to turn 16. A stealthy performance and a clever one at that here for the number 21. Second place here in the pro category. A great hustle by Benton, redeeming what was a less than desirable qualifying session. Vincent Simard guns for 3rd here in the 120. It's also worth noting that across the line a moment ago, we do have a division win there for the number 35. Didier Potvin claims on the AM division win. You're still yet to see, though, down to the line from behind. Wishful winnings here. As Vincent Simard claims on 3rd, Adrian Zavala makes his way down towards the line here to take your semi-pro victory in Season 4, Round 4. That's 3 different manufacturers across all 3 categories. Chevrolet win in Pro, Mercedes in Semi-Pro, Aston Martin in AM. Great performance then from all 3 of our division winners, but let's see the rest of the order down to the line. George Todd to the line there for 6th. Holds his nerve over Clinton Bourne, who sees 7th place. Dylan Vekere looks at the prospects of 8th. Across the line he goes there. 9th place for Carl Martel in the 99. I think it's a bit of a sad day here for Aiden Christie, but not to take away from what he's been able to accomplish over the course of today's race. Hang on, in the background there, who was that? The 99, that's Martel. I never thought I'd see that one there. That could massively shift things up. I think just escaping the fray there will be Isaac McMillan into the top 10 as Carl Martel crashes at the Vidal chicane. Aiden Christie sees Division 4th. 11th overall, Martel 12th, Potvin 13th, Peacock 14th, Jackal 15th, Tanguay 16th, Romano 17th, Cecil 18th, Stinson 19th, and Fisher in 20th. From behind them, Belbray in 21st, Carr in 22nd, Sanchez 23rd, Grenier Massey 24th, and Veldkamp in 25th. As the last of our finishing results, then DNFs for Risti, Shanovsky, David, Malup, and Pereira. On what has been a brutal outing here in the Nurburgring, your division winners at the end of Season 4, Round 4 of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, powered by Malwar Transport. Christian Lebay wins in Pro. Adrian Zavala wins in Semi-Pro. Didier Potvin wins in AM. A great performance by all 3 parties today and some brilliant fighting. Easy driver of the day pick then looks to go to the number 21. I'd say honourable mentions then given to the 32. But in the last couple of minutes there of that race, it went quite sour for the 32. That is not, though, to detract from the accomplishment of having come back from 28th through 30th. The last 3 cars on the grid, among them was Aiden Christie, sitting out qualifying due to a qualifying ban, comes through to a Division 4th, was a hair's width from the top 10, could have at one point seen 2nd in this race. The fact that he doesn't take away from how solid a drive that was for Christie, but taking a look at the tacticianry at play there for Benton, brilliant drive there. 2nd place in the Nurburgring. Great points all coming in for Benton in the Pro standings. Taking a look then at the road ahead here on Season 4, the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. Coming away from the Nurburgring, we'll be heading to the home of the Austrian Grand Prix, which very recently saw action in Formula 1 to a win by George Russell. We head to the Red Bull Ring on July 7th. That'll be the early hours of the morning on July 8th for our European viewers at 1 a.m. BST. Following on there from the Red Bull Ring, we head to the midway mark of the championship at 2 dash races at the Circuit Zolder on July 14th, otherwise the early hours of the morning on July 15th. The first half of the championship reigns ever closer, but we're a third of the way through on the longest ever season of the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series by Competizione Performance League. That's all from us here on TRTN. A brilliant performance then. Very well done to Lebay, Zavala, and Potvin, our 3 division winners over the course of today. Very well done also to our driver of the day, Justin Benton, in the number 21 Mercedes. If you're catching on with us later on, technically today, otherwise tomorrow for the local audience, you'll be seeing action from the OLRX VSR Midweek Championship. We head to the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps at 7:30 p.m. BST on July 1st, 2026. That's all from us. Take care and good night.